talk about it. It's another generation, a barrier to our development. Let's forget it. I walk through the autumn colours of the Cour Park back to my hotel, its riverside facade hung, obviously, with a huge mural of Franz Josef. I think back to Archduke Marcus in the Kaiservilla, scion of a 750-year-old dynasty, still lamenting the poor decisions of his ancestors. History is all around in Bad Ischl. The question is, what lessons do people here, everywhere, take from their past to inform the decisions of today and tomorrow?
Gareth Jones there, with the last of our stories for today. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope. You can hear more about the real lives behind the global headlines on the From Our Own Correspondent podcast. And we'll be back again with fresh stories next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme From Our Own Correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live downtown on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Today in the city of Winnipeg, it's becoming cloudy, a 60% chance we're going to have some late morning flurries and a high of -4. If you need us, give us a call, 788-3093. In terms of on the morning commute, we'll pass along any details. Of course, still lots of snow going on out there, especially in parts of western Manitoba where your drive could be a little tricky. And now we're fully into that icy season where we all are getting ready to take some precautions that we are going to need to be taking for the next number of months. Let's say good morning to the team. May McKillopson this morning. Hi, May. May's going to be directing the show for Corey Funk. Good morning to Kevin Nipatebo. Hello, Kev. Kev is our producer of our YouTube video stream, of the morning show, as well as Abby Adiyemi, who's going to be teching the show and covering weather and traffic, both on air in Corey's absence this morning. Heather Wells is here also. We have had a very busy news weekend, and she's here with updates. Good morning.
Good morning, yes. And a story that's developing since last evening around 8:30. Winnipeg police officers shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter near Unicity Mall last night. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat during a retail theft investigation. And we are going to hear from Acting Police Chief Art Stannard. We can tell you, though, that there's video circulating where police are heard telling the man to drop his weapon as he walks towards them. So we'll hear more coming up. As well, the grandparents of a teen who was shot by RCMP in Norway House on Friday say they are devastated. Elgin Muskego was shot. Police say the 17-year-old had an edged weapon and was coming towards some officers. And we'll hear more from his grandparents who say he was just turning his life around. Those stories and more in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, we are going to take you down south this morning because at 10 to 8, we're going to hear more of what a U.S. prosecutor called actions and active, quote, immoral depravity. I'm talking about what's going on with the trial down south. CBC reporter who attended the trial of 2 men convicted of human smuggling in relation to the deaths of that family from 4 from India. We will have Caitlin Patel in studio here. She's been covering all the details, so she'll be here to talk about the verdict. Right now, though, it's time to catch up on National News on World Report.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The whole time Henry Winkler was playing the Fonz on Happy Days, he was also struggling with a learning disability. Henry will tell you how his life changed after being diagnosed with dyslexia and how it led to him becoming a best-selling author of children's books. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with El-Amin Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Canada's housing crisis is affecting the availability of emergency shelter space. Women's Shelters Canada surveyed shelter workers. 87% say it is getting harder. 97% say it is getting harder to silence. The CBC's Julie Ireton has more on the story.
No space, no space. You just want somewhere to sleep.
This woman and her children slept in their car and couch surfed after escaping her abusive partner. CBC isn't naming her to protect her safety. She waited months to get into a temporary emergency shelter in Ottawa, but that was more than a year ago. She can't leave because she can't find affordable housing.
A woman should not be here more than 3 months. But when you go to 6 months, 9 months, a year, we lose our mind.
They are staying longer.
Anuretta Dougal is Executive Director of Women's Shelters Canada. Her organization recently surveyed shelter workers across the country.
Because there's nowhere for women to go after a shelter, basically it has a bottleneck effect. Women aren't leaving shelters.
Carrie Lewis runs Ottawa's Interval House, a shelter with 10 rooms and 30 beds that are always full.
We had to turn away almost 800. It's a crisis and we need to be doing something about it. But in terms of action, we're not building affordable housing at the rate that we need to.
Lewis's organization is set to construct a new transitional housing unit on the shelter's property. And over the next 4 years, Women's Shelters Canada hopes to help fund the building of 16 secondary housing projects in Canada, including one in New Brunswick and another in northern Alberta. But the advocates say much more affordable housing is needed. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Police will be on high alert today in Montreal as NATO wraps up its annual summit. On Friday night, a demonstration resulted in burned cars, shattered windows, and arrests. And now, another disturbing incident has surfaced on social media. Vanessa Lee has the details.
Politicians from Montreal's mayor to the prime minister called the situation appalling and condemned the violence. Friday night's anti-NATO, pro-Palestinian protest made international headlines after some demonstrators smashed windows and set cars on fire. Montreal police say they arrested 3 people for obstructing their work. One of the 3 is also accused of assaulting an officer.
We had 3, 4, 5 different demonstrations. Honestly, most of them, 90% of them went really well. But at the end, we have a group that was organized. It wasn't there for the cause, it was there just to destroy.
At a separate pro-Palestinian demonstration the day before, organized by different groups, a woman was filmed making a Nazi salute and chanting, "Final solution is coming your way." The Second Cup cafe chain has identified her as the franchisee of a location at Montreal's Jewish General Hospital. They've now canceled her contract. A company statement reads, Second Cup has zero tolerance for hate speech. In coordination with the hospital, we've shut down the franchisee's cafe and are terminating their franchise agreement. Montreal police say they're not aware of any case opened at its hate crimes and incidents unit over the past couple of days, but added they are expecting more arrests after Friday's clashes. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Political scientists are calling Romania's latest election results a revolt against the establishment. A little-known far-right populist took the lead in yesterday's presidential election, and he will probably face the incumbent leftist prime minister in a runoff vote in 2 weeks. Just outside the capital, Bucharest, this man says he does not know Călin Georgescu. Georgescu ran as an independent, and he has called NATO's ballistic missile defense shield a shame of diplomacy. His TikTok account is popular. It has 3.6 million likes. Georgescu mostly shares videos of himself going to church, doing judo, and talking on podcasts. At least one expert is suggesting Russian meddling may have given him an edge. Protesters in Punjab, Pakistan run as police fire tear gas into the crowd. Hundreds of Imran Khan supporters are trying to march to the capital to demand his release from jail. They want the former prime minister to be freed immediately. There have been violent clashes on the outskirts of Islamabad for the past 2 days. Officials have blocked roads leading into the city. Schools have been closed. Gatherings have been banned. Imran Khan is in jail on several corruption charges. He and his supporters say his imprisonment is politically motivated. Georgia's government is opening a new session of parliament, but the country's ceremonial president and the opposition lawmakers are staging a boycott. They are outside the parliament building with thousands of other protesters. They say the election was stolen. Here is opposition politician Georgi Vazadze.
We do not recognize the election results because it was a special operation driven by Russia against Georgian interests.
Georgi Vazadze. Georgia's election commission officially says the Georgian Dream Party won 54% of the vote in that last election. But 2 U.S. pollsters commissioned by the opposition have said the result is statistically impossible. Today could mark a pivotal moment in the pursuit of freedom for the Menendez brothers. The pair are serving life without parole for the 1989 murder of their parents. A Los Angeles judge will today consider a request by prosecutors to reduce their sentence. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman has the latest.
The request comes as attorneys say there is new evidence supporting the brothers' claim that they were sexually molested by their father, Jose Menendez. Attorney Mark Garagos.
Under the current state of the law, they're eligible to have, and the court has the discretion to recall the LWOP sentence, life without parole.
Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon says he supports a request to reduce the sentence from life without parole to 50 years to life.
I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board.
Many members of the Menendez family support their release. Ana Maria Baralt is the niece of Jose Menendez.
If Lyle and Eric's case were heard today, with the understanding we now have about abuse, there is no doubt in my mind that their sentencing would have been very different.
If the sentence is reduced, and with the brothers having already served more than 34 years in prison, they would be eligible for parole. But it would still need to be approved by the California Parole Board and the governor. Complicating the issue is the fact that the current district attorney is set to be replaced next month, and the new DA says he needs time to review the case before deciding. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating a shooting overnight in Winnipeg. Officials say a Winnipeg police officer was stabbed in the throat during a retail theft investigation. An officer shot and killed the suspect. The suspect was given CPR at the scene and was later pronounced dead at hospital. He has not been identified. The wounded police officer is in hospital in stable condition. A Victoria couple says WestJet is trying to silence their efforts to seek compensation. They say they sought advice online after their flight was rebooked by the airline, but a WestJet lawyer intervened. Experts say it's part of a growing and troublesome trend. Erica Johnson has more in this Go Public investigation.
Victoria couple Anna Gurney and her husband Russell had booked WestJet tickets to get to San Diego for a cruise. But the morning of their flight, WestJet rebooked them on a flight leaving 2 days later.
Accepting that itinerary meant we would have missed the cruise ship.
The Gurneys had to book new tickets on a competitor's airline for $1,500 more, then took WestJet to small claims court for compensation. Looking for advice, Anna Gurney posted correspondence with a WestJet lawyer on a Facebook group for air passengers. But the law firm saw it, asked Gurney to remove it, and withdrew a settlement offer for sharing what it called confidential settlement discussions.
This is a prestigious law firm representing a huge airline. I am feeling frightened.
Even disputes handled by the regulator are shrouded in secrecy. Full Canadian Transportation Agency decisions on airline disputes used to be posted online, but new rules last year made them confidential, aside from some basic details. University of Ottawa prof. Paul Daly.
I think it's probably unconstitutional.
A spokesperson for Transport Canada said the new rules make resolving disputes more efficient. As for WestJet, it told Go Public it was just following the rules and did settle with the Gurneys, but made them sign a non-disclosure agreement to get their money. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcus. I hope you had a great weekend. Thank you for joining us and starting your morning with Information Radio and CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. or as my friend calls it, the YouTubes. All right, let's look at the temperature here just briefly. In Winnipeg, we're mostly cloudy. We're at -10. Winds are calm, and we're going to get into your forecast in some more detail momentarily. Well, this hour on the program, a Manitoban has tested positive for a severe strain of Mpox. We're going to hear from a medical researcher this hour to share what needs to happen from stopping this from spreading in our province and beyond, so stay tuned. In addition, we're going to look at what's happening in Haiti. New calls for a formal UN peacekeeping mission in Haiti right now as gang violence has flared up again in the capital, Port-au-Prince, as we've been hearing in national coverage, but we'll have full analysis of that situation. Stay with us. Speaking of violence, we had a violent weekend in Winnipeg. Heather Wells is in to talk about some of the stories and developments that they've been following in our CBC News Centre. Good morning.
Good morning. Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit is looking into an incident that happened last night. A man was shot and killed by Winnipeg police. Police say an officer on the scene was stabbed in the throat before that shooting and is in hospital now in stable condition. Now, I mentioned the Independent Investigation Unit. Well, the former civilian director of Manitoba's police watchdog wants to know why it hasn't made some necessary changes. 3 years ago, the former PC government introduced a bill to make changes to the province's Independent Investigation Unit. The changes would have introduced jail time or fines for police officers who don't comply with requests from the unit. It also would have created community liaisons to work with families involved in investigations. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into what's going on in the weather and the traffic situation. Abby's covering both because Corey's off. Hi, Abby. How you doing?
Hi, Marcy. How you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'm happy that there's at least a skiff of snow down in Winnipeg. It made my Christmas decorations, the first few I started popping up, look a little bit more appropriate.
Sure, beginning to feel like winter wonderland. And for some people this morning, you may need some extra time to really defog and de-ice your windshields before you head out. Looking across the province, the northern region will be experiencing colder temperatures with light snow. And wind chills is actually something we will talk about today because we're going to be seeing ranging from -20 to -30 wind chill in some areas. It will include western Manitoba, the Parkland region will be facing chillier temperatures. Also, the Red River Valley and the Pembina Valley regions will be noticing that wind chills, making it feel even colder than actual temperatures. And for the Winnipeg area, we will see cloudy conditions, occasional flurries here and there, but the temperatures will be slightly warmer compared to the northern areas. We're going to see highs around the -4 to -6 in the central part, including Winnipeg here. Right now, we are at -10. Mainly clear outside. The clouds will roll in as we get into the morning, bringing a good chance of flurries later in the morning into the afternoon, along with a slight risk of freeze and drizzle in the forecast. It will stay breezy though, and then a high for today will get to around -4. Though for this morning, the wind chill, as mentioned earlier, it's feeling like -19, so you might want to prepare for that accordingly as you step out. Looking across board, we're seeing temperatures above around the -10 and -12s this morning. So you might really want to prepare for that.
I'm starting to pay more attention to my footwear as my back stairs are, just a little icy or all that kind of stuff. How's the drive today?
So far, the only thing I'll just mention on the drive is you need to be careful. Braking time, give yourself, when you're hitting the brakes, it's a bit slippery out there. But if you see anything, let us know. 788-3093.
Well, let's begin talking about Mpox. And in East and Central Africa, Mpox has been rapidly spreading. And now, as I mentioned, a Manitoban returning from the continent has tested positive for the most severe strain of the virus, the clade 1 strain. They are the first person in our country to test positive for this. And while they are now isolated, the overall risk to the public is low. But there's still lots to understand about this. Winnipeg microbiologist Jason Kindrachuk is recently spent spent time in the Democratic Republic of the Congo studying Mpox. He says the detection of clade 1 in Canada is significant. In an interview with CBC Newsnet, Kinderchuk explained why to host Deanna Sumanak-Johnson.
It comes back to being a testament for the surveillance system that we have in place, and certainly I think the preparedness for Mpox in general. I don't mean that to sound as if we shouldn't be concerned, but really it comes back to the fact that following 2022, what we did see was a sudden increase in the knowledge on Mpox in the healthcare community, as well as an increase in our readiness and preparedness for this exact situation. And unfortunately, while the situation has escalated in the DRC and beyond, what we have seen is really global north countries have actually been very well prepared for identifying cases early.
I want to ask you about that because I was covering some of those cases, earlier cases in the last few years, and I remember seeing such a call out for vaccination, and that so many people did get vaccinated, and that ended up really stymieing the transmission rates, and eventually it stopped the transmission in this country. I want to ask you about how is that the plan here, or what can we do this time around?
Well, I think, listen, for global north countries, again, we've had a surplus of vaccines. I really think it's been about trying to get community engagement to ensure people have known, first of all, where they can get access to vaccines, but also ensuring that they also come back for second doses and don't just stop at first doses. So we need to continue to do that piece about it and continue the continual, education of the public on Mpox. I think the bigger piece, though, is still really getting vaccines into endemic countries. I think we're trying to kind of shut off water leakage in a hose when really we're not focusing on the tap, which is the continual circulation we've seen in West and Central Africa for many decades. Vaccines are coming in now, which is good. The unfortunate reality, though, is that they're not getting out and in arms or getting in the doses enough on the ground that we need to really get this contained certainly at a quick pace.
Tell me, you just came back from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there are quite a few more cases of this strain of Mpox. Tell me, what was that like?
Listen, I've been back and forth into DRC quite often over the last few years, have great colleagues there from the National Institute, or colleagues from UCLA and from ITM at Antwerp in Belgium, who've all been on the ground trying to contain this, and knowing in 2023 what the situation was already becoming even before 2024. So the situation continues to be dire. We're seeing geographic expansion in really all provinces of the country. South Kivu continues to be a hotbed for certainly close, sustained human-to-human transmission. But listen, we're starting to see that pick up in Kinshasa, in the capital city of 17 million as well. So we know that we have a lot on hand to try to get this contained. Vaccines are going to help, but we still need things like diagnostic testing and supportive care for patients as well.
Tell me about the difference between this clade 1 and the previous strains of Mpox that we've had in Canada.
What I can say is that it's complicated. And the reality is, historically, clade 1 was always considered to be more severe. I think the reality right now is maybe that's a little bit murkier than what we thought previously. We can't say a lot about the clade 1 versus clade 2 virus, which is the type that's endemic in West Africa, which is what we saw in 2022. What we are seeing, though, in DRC, again, is a bit of a split. The clade 1 virus that has really been kind of spreading through zoonotic transmission, through close contact with rodents, that in kids has had high mortality and morbidity. But what we've seen is clade 1b, which is picked up in South Kivu, and which has been kind of moving through the sustained human-to-human transmission. Those case fatality rates have been very, very low, and we've seen more of a higher proportion of cases amongst older people, above the age of 15 years old. So, the tale continues to be a little bit different depending on where we're looking in DRC, and it continues to expand as we move forward in this ongoing public health emergency.
And we have news from the World Health Organization. They have just approved the first Mpox vaccine for children to be used in African countries that you were just talking about. How big of a deal is this?
Listen, it's a massive deal, right? Because we've known for a long period of time, again, that mortality and that morbidity is certainly a lot higher amongst kids under the age of 15, and certainly amongst those that are under the age of 5. So when we look at who really needs to get those vaccines, on the ground in DRC, it has continually been kids within that age group. I think the bigger piece now is how quickly we're going to see that vaccine and those doses actually get on the ground and get moved out into communities, and as well that community engagement piece of ensuring that there's a high acceptance and uptake of vaccination as well. So it's it's a good move. It's a positive note, but I think we want to see how this is going to play out, in the second, third, and fourth quarters, as opposed to just looking at the first.
Jason, in terms of our domestic situation here, presumably people who have been in contact with the infected person, they will be contacted by public health authorities as contact tracing takes place. If Canadians want to stay safe from this strain of Mpox, what should they do?
Yeah, listen, the situation really hasn't changed since 2022, right? So we know that there are certainly specific populations that are at increased risk for infection. We know that sex workers are at increased risk for infection. That has certainly been the case in South Kivu and in DRC. We know people that identify as gay, bisexual, or other men who have sex with men are also at increased risk for infection. That still, follows along with what we saw in 2022, as well as people experiencing homelessness and people that are in very dense population settings. The reality we have to appreciate, though, with this virus is that everything we've seen in terms of transmission requires either very close, intimate contacts or very close extended contacts with people that are providing care or who have consistent contact with things like soiled linens or dressing. So I think for us, a lot of it is about ensuring messaging is getting out to the communities that we need to get messaging to, and ensuring that certainly our healthcare workers and all of our provincial health authorities are on the ball in terms of being able to get testing done. They have all the proper reagents that they need to be able to perform testing, and as well that we have good continual surveillance, not only here in the country, but also as well on the ground in DRC and endemic areas.
So once again, that is Jason Kinderchuk in conversation with CBC host Deanna Sumanak-Johnson about Mpox and the fact that there is a Manitoban who has returned from the East and Central Africa and who has tested positive for the most severe strain of the virus, the clade 1 strain. They are the first person in our country to test positive for that. And if you want to read more about it, you can check out our web story. Jason Kinderchuk is, of course, the Canada Research Chair on Emerging Viruses at the University of Manitoba.
Breaking this hour,
CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview, on now.
It is 6:23 a.m. Stay tuned for our 6:30 news. Heather Wells will have the latest on the weekend's news stories, including the shooting that happened, police-involved shooting that happened yesterday in Winnipeg. So stay tuned. Right now it is -10. It's mostly cloudy in the city. Our high today is -4, and we have a 60% chance of late morning flurries on the way. Well, the security situation on the streets of Haiti's capital city continues to be tense. Last week, officials with the Kenyan-led International Police Force called on the United Nations to consider a formal peacekeeping mission in the embattled Caribbean nation. That's after ongoing gang violence in Port-au-Prince. To talk about it this morning, Danny Nadel joined us at 6. He's a professor in the Department of Political Science in the Monk School at the University of Toronto. Here is what he shared.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what have you been hearing about the current situation in Port-au-Prince?
Well, what we're hearing is that it continues to deteriorate. Armed groups control now anywhere between 50 and 85% of the territory of Port-au-Prince, plus large swaths of other cities in Haiti and parts of the countryside. Violence has started to reach parts of the city, wealthier neighborhoods, wealthier communities that were relatively unscathed so far. The airport in Port-au-Prince is still closed, and there's still an advisory against travel to Haiti. And there's a new report that just came out detailing that anywhere between 30 and 50% of the membership of these armed groups is now made up of children, which adds another horrifying dimension to the whole conflict.
Oh. Remind us how powerful these armed gangs are and how much of the capital they control.
They're fairly powerful, right? These groups, they're not just gangs. They have a long history in Haiti. Many of them emerge out of political parties. They use violence against each other as part of the political jockeying. So they're the armed branches of major political parties with deep ties to the ruling elites, business elites. They're private actors of violence, contractors for targeted assassinations, for all kinds of criminal activities. But they've outgrown that purpose, and they now have taken on a life of their own. They have access to international black market for arms, right? Mostly coming out of the United States. So often they have weapons that are more powerful and more plentiful than the weapons that the Haitian National Police and the Kenyan forces have access to. And they control now, close to 85% of the territory of Port-au-Prince, depending on how you think about what it means to control territory. But it can definitely exclude the police from most of the city at this point.
So I know that there was an international security force led by Kenya that arrived last June. The hope was it would help curb violence in Port-au-Prince. There are calls for a formal UN peacekeeping mission now. What's your reaction to that, given how you've outlined the situation?
So the mission led by Kenya, there was hope, but the hope was really wishful thinking. No one seriously thought that a couple of hundred troops from Kenya was going to put a dent in the situation. The reason why we ended up with this mission that is woefully unprepared is because the United States and other countries that were pressing for a formal UN peacekeeping mission failed to get one because few countries volunteered to sign up for the mission. Canada repeatedly refused to take the leadership position. Brazil refused. Right? Brazil had led mission from 2004 to 2017. They had a mixed record and left the country with a lot of blemishes on its record. And so when the United States kept looking for a partner, for someone to lead the mission, Kenya finally volunteered. And a handful of other countries in the Caribbean also volunteered some forces, but none of them have materialized so far. So now the repeated calls for a formal UN peacekeeping mission are the recognition that this mission that was always a long shot, that was never fully funded and fully deployed, is unable to accomplish its goals. But the mission is unlikely to get off the ground for the same reason that it didn't back in 22, which is a few countries want to actually take on that role, and B, the Chinese and the Russian governments don't want to see the UN taking on this role anymore. We haven't had a formal peacekeeping mission since 2014. Right? That was the last time that the Security Council approved one.
2 weeks ago, planes were shot at, causing the U.S. to halt flights to Port-au-Prince International Airport. What's the latest on that situation?
So far, the airport in Port-au-Prince continues to be closed as of the last time I checked last night. Airports in the north side of the island in Cap-Haïtien have reopened. I think the FAA continues to advise against flying to Haiti. And they expect to be able to reopen the airport soon, but that's going to depend on whether the police in Haiti and the Kenyan forces manage to secure the area around the airport.
What's the path forward to find greater security in Haiti? It's been a struggle for so long.
Yeah, I would argue that the path forward starts with us recognizing that this is not just a law enforcement problem, right? It's not just about gangs roaming the streets, although there's definitely plenty of that, right? But it's recognizing why these organizations exist to begin with, how they've been able to organize in this fashion and build up an alliance, right? Most of these organizations are now under the leadership of Jimmy Barbecue Cherisier, who he himself, a former police officer. So understanding the role that these organizations have played in the ecosystem in Haiti and the factors that are driving folks into participating in these groups, right? As I said, if now half of the membership of these armed groups is children, you have to look at why is it that children are so vulnerable to either co-optation or to coercion into these groups, right? What's the situation? The lack of economic opportunities, the lack of access to food, to school, that makes society so vulnerable. And so it's really not just about sending more peacekeepers or sending more police forces there, but addressing the lack of economic development and access. So there's going to be, some interim humanitarian assistance that needs to be redoubled or tripled. But also then we need to look at investment and rebuilding the economy to allow it to be self-sustaining and creating opportunities for people to engage in normal economic activities and reintegrating people into society.
Danny, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Danny Nadel is a professor in the Department of Political Science in the Monk School at the University of Toronto. Stay with us. We're going to talk about what's going on with the Canada Post situation, labor situation, right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -10. Exactly a month until Christmas, and our temperature is going to be right where it should be, a high today of -4. Good chance of flurries through the day and a risk of freezing drizzle later this morning. Winnipeg police officers shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter near Unicity Mall last night. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat during a retail theft investigation. In video posted on social media, 2 police officers can be seen with guns pointed at the man just outside a bus shelter. They're heard telling him to drop his weapon as he walks towards them. Acting Police Chief Art Stannard says the call over the radio was tough to hear.
This transmission is one that we never, ever want to receive. Officer stabbed in the throat. Suspect is down.
Stannard says he visited the officer in hospital and he is in stable condition. Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating. The family of a teen shot dead by RCMP says police had no need to use deadly force. 17-year-old Elgin Muskego was killed outside a Norway House home on Friday. RCMP say he was coming towards police with an edged weapon and didn't drop it despite being ordered to do so. Charles Edaway-Capo is Elgin's grandfather and helped to raise him.
He was just a little boy. He's 17 years old. There's always forgiveness, but we will never forget our grandson, our son. And my grandkids are just the same thing. They're missing his presence here already.
Edaway-Capo says police could have used a taser or other methods that would have prevented his grandson's death. Manitoba's police watchdog has taken over the investigation. Norway House says it is launching its own investigation and is considering imposing a state of emergency. Changes meant to fix problems with Manitoba's police watchdog still have not happened. 3 years ago, the former PC government introduced a bill to strengthen the investigative powers of the Independent Investigation Unit. This is the body that does investigate all serious incidents involving police, like the 2 previous stories. It would introduce penalties or fines for police officers who don't comply with the IIU's requests. Jerry Singer's brother, Bradley, was fatally shot by police in February. He is frustrated the new legislation still isn't in place.
It says it all, like they recognize there's a problem. They spend time, studying for solutions, and then they don't implement them.
Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says the delay is because the bill is complex, but he says he is committed to implementing the changes. The Manitoba Nurses Union wants AI detectors in hospitals right across the province. President Darlene Jackson says nurses felt safer while the Health Sciences Centre tested them earlier this year.
There is a responsibility to ensure that everyone in our healthcare facilities is safe. And if there is a patient there or a visitor or a family member who comes in with a weapon and then escalates, no one is safe.
A letter from an anonymous HSC nurse was discussed at the legislature on Friday, and the nurse claims staff have found many dangerous objects this year, including a crowbar. Premier Rob Canoe says his government is listening to the nurses and has hired more than 100 safety officers since coming into office. Canada's housing crisis is affecting the availability of emergency shelter space. Women's Shelters Canada surveyed shelter workers across the country. It found 97% say it's getting harder to support people who are fleeing gender-based violence. You can hear more on that story coming up on World Report at 7. A new self-guided tour is putting the spotlight on Latvian Canadians in Manitoba. One of the stops is the Carland family farm in Lithuania, or Little Latvia, in the arm of Lac de Bonny. Peter Carland established a homestead there in 1912 after fleeing his country as a refugee. His granddaughter, 72-year-old Susan Carland, says he could never return to Latvia for fear of retribution after the country was taken over by Russia.
He lost a few friends that would go back to check out the situation. He would never hear from them again. And then I guess he just turned his back and said, you know what, this is where we're going to be living. And we just grew up knowing that we would be Canadian.
Carland says a lot of Latvians set out not just for Canada, but for Lac de Bonny, as they heard a lot of Latvians were settling there. By the Second World War, the area had the biggest Latvian population in Canada, west of Toronto. You can hear more on this story coming up right here on Information Radio, following World Report at 7. And you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
You know, it's one of my favorite things about Communities in Focus, because we just, that story came to fruition because we reached out and said, who's got stories?
Yeah.
Like, how interesting it is, right?
And something I didn't know about.
I thought you were going to finish your sentence. Me neither. I didn't know. I had no idea about the population around Lac de Bonny at all.
Yeah.
As you said, though, Emily Brass found out lots more, and she's going to join us after 7. Thank you, Heather.
Great. I'll be looking forward to hearing it.
All right. Let's. You can hear my brain's not clicking fully this morning yet, I don't think, Abby.
Fine.
More caffeine for us while Abby gives us the weather.
It's actually clear outside. We'll see some clouds roll in this morning, bringing some flurries and a slight risk of freezing drizzle by the afternoon period. So if you're going on your lunch break and you're driving, it will kind of be slippery. It's going to stay breezy. We're going to see temperatures warm up to about -4 today. Though with the wind chill this morning, as you step outside, it's going to be feeling like -19. And then tonight, expect those cloudy conditions to still bring in more light snow with temperatures just around -9. Brandon sitting at -2. We're seeing light snow already falling. Expect a mix of sun and cloud today. This light snow is going to stay with you, bringing some kind of a risk of a freezing drizzle to come with that, and we'll see highs around -11. But starting this morning, you step outside, the wind chill feels like -23, so you might want to prepare accordingly, because that's still going to drop to around, the feel will be around -20 when you get into the afternoon. Thompson sitting at -14. We're also seeing light snow drifting at this point. Today's forecast says this light snow will stay with you for most of the day, and you see highs around -11. If we move further north to Churchill, it is -11 at this point. We're also seeing light snow there. Expect this to stay with you for most of the day. You get to a high of -9. With the wind chill, it feels like -20 this morning. Dauphin is sitting at -11, also seeing light snow with cloudy skies. This is going to stay with you for most of the day. Along with that, we'll see some freezing drizzle felt here and there, and the highs would only touch -7. Though with the wind chill factored in, it feels close to -20 also. Gimli at -9 with partly cloudy conditions. The Interlake region will see more of these cloudy conditions stay for most of the day. There's a good chance of flurries in the forecast. Then you'd notice some freezing drizzle. The highs would be around -4. Steinbach -10 at this point. Clouds will also bring in a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. Along with that risk of freezing drizzle, the high will be around -2. Though with the wind chill this morning, it feels like -22. Morris is at -14. We're seeing partly cloudy conditions there. The forecast for the Pembina Valley region actually calls for a mix of sun and clouds, then becoming cloudy with a risk of afternoon flurries still staying with you. And the high would only get to -6, though with the wind chill factored in, it feels like -19. So we're looking at cold temperatures with snow and flurries in the forecast across board, and that would, this snow we're seeing would be impacting traffic. So if you're like in the Dauphin area, Russell, Roblin, and you just down to the Dock Mountain area, this low pressure system will be bringing, like snow spreading here and there, though it's going to taper off later this morning, but that might be impacting your driving conditions.
Oh, for sure.
So you might want to take care when you're on the road, and also some slippery spots here and there. So remember, braking time is going to be different as we change the season.
Getting used to it. My father-in-law actually drove into Saskatchewan over the weekend, and he sent back pictures and said, here's what's coming. I'm just going to hunker down here until I can safely make it back to Manitoba. So it started there first, as we know. So
you know, I have this thing in my head about driving on slippery roads. I say just put like a glass cup in front of the dashboard and try not to spill it. That's
man.
That's what I picture
wise
in my
words,
head.
Right?
Just put it there and try not to spill it. So that means you just have to be very careful while you drive. You see anything on the road, let us know, 788-3093.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's get to something else now, which is the Canada Post strike. Now, we're in the second week of this. It's essentially shut down service. And Christely Ramilcan is here with our business news. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So is there any end in sight?
Well, the union and the company are really showing no signs of reaching agreement right now after weekend talks failed to make headway. So yesterday, Canada Post said negotiations are ongoing, but progress has been limited. So there, as we know, and we've been reporting, there have been ripple effects across this country on small businesses, charities, and remote communities that rely on postal service. So Canada Post says so far it's missed out on delivering millions of parcels, and it says it may miss out on even more with Black Friday this week. So the Crown Corporation and the union have met several times with a federal mediator in the last week in an effort to try to break this deadlock. The union has been focused on wages, minimum hours for part-time workers, and Canada Post's call to introduce weekend package deliveries. So the company says this is needed to try to grow the parcel business and to secure the company's future. Canada Post says it's offered a pay increase of 11.5% over 4 years, but the union is looking for about double that. And Canada Post has lost more than $3 billion since 2008, so the company is not doing so well. And on Friday, it said it was on track for another year in the red after losing another $315 million in the third quarter.
All right. Well, let's mention something here that you may not have in every city in the country, Christely, and that is that I noticed on Facebook around the River Heights neighborhood in Winnipeg, people were naming streets. Renfrew, Waterloo, Kingsway, and Waterloo is one of the intersections. There's these mailboxes that have been popping up, and apparently there's some Santa elves that are picking up letters still to Santa.
Wow.
So I know a lot of kids have been worried about that because of the strike. So apparently there are some mailboxes. You can't miss them around town. They say Santa Claus letters, they're red, and then there's ribbons all up the pole. So you may, in fact, find a way to get your letters to Santa after all, at least out of Winnipeg here. So got some special elves in our city, I think. Let's move to another story. Facebook parent company Meta is fighting the CRTC. What's going on?
Yeah, so Meta is refusing to publicly disclose information that could determine whether it is subject to the Online News Act, despite blocking news from its platforms. So it has declined to follow the CRTC's directions to either publicly release this information or explain in detail why it should remain confidential. Now, the Heritage Minister's office says this sends a troubling message that Meta considers itself to be above oversight. So as we know, last year, the company blocked news from Facebook and Instagram in response to the Online News Act. And that legislation would have required Meta to compensate media outlets for displaying their content. But the Liberal government maintains that the company could still fall under this act because, well, users have found workarounds to continue to share news on platforms. So I'm sure you've seen this. People are sharing screenshots of articles or copying the text of articles and posts. So they are somehow still sharing news. Now, last month, the regulator asked the company what measures it was taking to comply with the Online News Act. The company filed a confidential response, and the CRTC told Meta that it must provide a detailed explanation of why information should be kept confidential, and Meta declined to do that. And it said the letter includes specific measures that the company uses to remove access to news, which it has not made public, and that it includes confidential information relating to its business. But the CRTC says that's not a good enough explanation.
And finally, how did Wicked and Gladiator 2 do over the weekend at the box office?
Yeah, so there was a big jump at the box office. So some have dubbed the releases Glicked. So, kind of following the Barbenheimer thing that we saw in 2023. Yep. So going into the weekend, actually, ticket sales were down about 11% from last year, both here in Canada and the U.S. But Wicked debuted at #1 in North America, and Wicked is expected to rake in about $114 million U.S., while Gladiator will pull in about $55.5 million at the domestic box offices. And Wicked now has the biggest opening weekend for a musical adaptation of a Broadway show, surpassing Disney's Into the Woods. And it also grabbed the 3rd spot for the highest grossing opening weekend of the year. Now, Gladiator, the sequel to the Best Picture winner from 23 years ago, also set a record as the biggest November opening day for an R-rated film. But, Marcy, this bounce also came at quite a steep price. So, Universal Pictures mounted one of the largest marketing campaigns in Hollywood history for Wicked. Seems like it's been everywhere. The effort started back in February at the Super Bowl and has not let up since. And the movie studio also secured more than 400 brand partnerships for the film, including dolls from Mattel, drinks at Starbucks, Lego sets, and clothing. And Gladiator 2 also cost about at least $350 million to make and market, and was given the hard sell too. So Paramount Pictures advertised heavily at sporting events, set up partnerships with Ferrari and Pepsi, and simultaneously debuted a trailer for the film on more than 4,000 television networks, digital platforms, local stations, and radio stations.
Yeah, they're going to milk it. What's going on in the markets today?
In Europe, stocks are mixed. So Germany is up, the UK is up, France is up. In Asia, markets are mostly on the rise. Japan is up right now, but Shanghai and Hong Kong are both still down overall. Now, oil is down 8 cents to 71.16 US per barrel. Gold is down 33.20 to $2,682.70 US per ounce. And the dollar is up almost 1/10 cent to 71.6 cents US.
All right, Crystal Ramlichan, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's Crystal Ramlichan with our business news. Well, last week when we asked you about the federal holiday on GST, we got so many comments that came in. Now, one of the most interesting things on the list that the feds put forward, this holiday starts December 14th, goes for 2 months, was that some groceries are going to be missing the GST, which you won't be missing because it's so expensive out there. On Cross Country Checkup this weekend, CBC host Ian Hanamansing asked, what's your reaction to Justin Trudeau's tax break on groceries? Rather, it was guest host John Northcott asking. And the sub-question was, is it enough to help with your food costs?
I was telling the producer I actually work in groceries, so I think any kind of tax break right now is good. In the short term, I talk to a lot of younger people. I talk to elderly people. There's quite a lot of students that are very happy to hear this might be a tax break. The number of people I see in a day, often there's 400 individual folks. Many of them are buying prepared foods. There's a certain amount of people in the population who make a lot of their own food from scratch, but it dwindled. And a lot of people either don't have the time or they don't have the initiative to do it. This is easy and simple. So a lot of pizzas, a lot of prepared foods go out the door. So sometimes I think maybe somebody did do some research and they know that families rely on a lot of that food.
Why don't they just forget about this whole thing about handing out the freebies or the lack of GST and bolster the food banks across the country? Because there are people, they have to actually close their doors. I've heard people that have wanted to go to the food bank and they're turned away saying, sorry, we've got enough members. That's a scary thought. So when I hear somebody running the country telling me that, listen, folks, you're going to be able to get your beer and wine without paying the GST for 2 months, I'm really offended.
It's another insult for me as a disabled person. I've been dragged down through a system that's not meant to help you. Like today, I made a choice. Do I eat today or do I eat tomorrow? I am homeless. I'm couch surfing. I've been doing that for almost 2 years now. I worked hard for 40 years. I made really good money until I got hurt. It took 3 years before I was eligible for any provincial benefits because I had too much money. Now, what I made in a day, I make in a month. The whole world seems upside down, and the way they treat the disabled is brutal.
Those were some of the callers on Cross Country Checkup yesterday responding to the question, what's your reaction to Justin Trudeau's tax break holiday on groceries and snack food specifically? And is it enough to help you with your food costs? I want to take just a moment to mention that not this Friday, but next Friday is our day to think about food costs, also to think about Winnipeg's largest, Manitoba's rather largest food bank. So Harvest Manitoba and its member agencies across this province, so much need out there. We're going to have our day of Make the Season Kind, or I should say to Make the Season Kind. That's next Friday with a special day of programming, stories, and music to reflect need and hope in our community. So we hope you make a date with us here at CBC Radio. Time right now is 10 to 7 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. And next on the show, the COP29 Climate Summit came to a close this weekend in Baku, Azerbaijan. And after 2 weeks of negotiations, world governments have agreed to a plan that would see weather-polluting countries fund climate initiatives in the developing world. But despite commitments, tensions remain high. To learn more, Annabella Bonata is with us. She's Managing Director of Climate Science at the University of Waterloo's Intact Center on Climate Adaptation. Good morning.
Good morning.
I got marbles in my mouth this morning. I apologize. They were meeting through the weekend because they couldn't come to an agreement on some of these things. They were continuing to talk. So now that, the conference has officially ended, there's mixed reviews out there. How do you characterize this COP?
Yeah, definitely mixed reviews. There were some minor successes, but it wasn't an efficient or overall successful conference. So very early on, the host nation did make comments on not really intending to transition away from fossil fuels. And so that set the stage for what would be spoken about. And then the nations that did come together and discuss the deal just couldn't come to an agreement. They went overtime on the 2 weeks. It's understandable. It's many nations coming together on a very major agreement. But we know that a lot needs to be done. We know the funds that are necessary. Developing nations were asking for $1.3 trillion. We know how they're being impacted and the needs that they have. But nations just couldn't agree on who would pay for what and just how much.
So where did things land on the climate financing issue then, just to look at that?
Yeah, so in the final agreement, the richer developed nations have pledged $300 billion a year by 2035 to go towards developing nations. So 10 years from now, they will be getting 0.3 of the 1.3 trillion that they had asked for. In the meantime, the previous pledge was $100 billion, so that's still going towards those countries. And these funds are meant to help them both also transition away from fossil fuels and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but also help them prepare much better for the impacts of climate change. So some of the funds go towards adapting their home countries. So, for example, small island nations that are experiencing sea level rise and continuous flooding, some of these funds could help relocate some of the highest risk communities or also have better emergency alert systems. So when there is an extreme event that's coming through an area such as a hurricane, having an alert system that allows members of that nation to really prepare ahead of the impact that's coming their way.
What is your sense of where, how much real progress was made in Baku in terms of anything that will move the needle? Because you started by saying they set out without, by saying they weren't going to tackle some of the things that you feel were the most important. And now you've said that, the less money significantly than what was asked to help developing nations. What did they come up with that you think will make effective change?
I wouldn't call it effective change. I would say they've moved the needle slightly, so there will be more funds, and nations have agreed that more funds are needed in the future. So the $1.3 trillion are agreed on. It's not like they're looking at the number and saying, no, that's not what you need. So just getting all these people to agree on something is, it moves the needle slightly. But what they have agreed to do, the funds that they're going to provide, will not cause the changes that the nations need to make in order to really become resilient to climate change for the next 50 years. So they'll kind of, cover some gaps or help them recover in a short amount of time. But as we look at the long term, at the long game, we're not really doing anything to improve our situation or their situation. So what was really left out of this agreement was the transitioning from fossil fuel use to, greener technologies. And they've said that they're going to deal with this in COP30. There's a year away until COP30. In that year, our emissions will continue to go up. And that just means we continue to contribute to the impacts of climate change that are being felt across the world, including Canada.
And what about drill, baby, drill? I mean, the elephant in the room, the United States, the president-elect. I'm wondering how that tension point came up over the past 2 weeks as it relates to COP and concerns over what the direction the U.S. seems to be poised to be taking here.
Unfortunately, that was a major concern. And because the election occurred right before COP29, it set the stage for COP29. So knowing that a president is coming in who might pull out of the Paris Agreement, he has said he will do that. I'm hoping he'll change his mind in the next few months before he takes office. But knowing that one of the major nations of the world might pull out of the agreement can set other nations up to say, well, why should I be contributing so many of my funds that can be going to my own country towards the developing world if the U.S. will not be doing it, if they won't be contributing in the future? So it really set the stage for the conversations and set the tone. So some of the major countries didn't send their heads of state. So Canada's head of state wasn't there. Justin Trudeau didn't attend. Joe Biden didn't attend. Some countries pulled out early. So Argentina's aligning itself very much with Trump now that he's been elected. And they pulled out of the conference 3 days in. So this win on his end is really is kind of like causing this other nations to cop out as well a little bit on their agreements. And it's making it less hopeful for those of us that really want to see some major changes occur.
Thank you for your analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
It's Annabella Bonata, the Managing Director of Climate Science at the University of Waterloo's Intact Centre on Climate Adaptation. So you can read more about analysis of COP now that it has wrapped up on our national site at cbc.ca. It is right now exactly 3 minutes to 7 on your Monday morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at Information Radio. Thanks for being here. I hope you had a good weekend. We'll get into the forecast and then a bit of a traffic note out there to alert you about in a moment. Right now, Heather Wells is here with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg police officers shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter near Unicity Mall last night. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat during a retail theft investigation. That officer is in stable condition. We're going to hear from Acting Police Chief Art Stannard coming up. And the Independent Investigation Unit has taken over that investigation. Now, the former civilian director of Manitoba's police watchdog, the IIU, wants to know why it hasn't made some necessary changes. 3 years ago, the former PC government introduced a bill to make changes to the IIU. We'll hear more from our I-team on that coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
I'm going to start with traffic here because this is just in due to a fire in the 400 block of Elgin. Elgin is closed east and west, and Elgin at Princess is closed. So if you're imagining where this is, so plan alternate routes. You're going to have delays if you go through there. Just avoid the area if you can. Also really slick as well out there on parts of western Manitoba highways as well. You can expect some snow. There's a small system that's going to be traveling into Manitoba today again. So just take it easy. Give yourself space. We're into winter driving now. 788-3093 if you do need to reach us. In the forecast itself, mostly cloudy in Winnipeg, -10. Brandon's light snow and -12 right now. Thompson, light snow and drifting snow with -14. In Winnipeg, bundle up. You might even need a scarf across the face today. A high of -4, but with wind chill on exposed skin, could feel like -19. So if you're waiting for the bus out there, you might want to make sure you remember your mitts for sure. Our high in the city is going to be -4. In the next hour of Information Radio, a U.S. prosecutor called their actions an act of, quote, immoral depravity. We're going to talk to a CBC reporter from Manitoba who attended the trial of 2 men convicted of human smuggling in relation to the deaths of a family of 4 from India. Caitlin Garlick's been down south. She's going to join us in studio to tell us more about this. In addition, for years, Warm Boots and Warm Hearts has been helping Winnipeggers in need to get the perfect pair of warm winter boots. And they just gave away their 1,000th, it's hard to say, pair. After the news, we're going to talk with them about this milestone, so stay tuned for the next hour.
Today on The Current.
The Premier of Nova Scotia has called a snap election.
Voters in Nova Scotia go to the polls tomorrow, and there's a lot at stake. From health care to housing, affordability to immigration. Guest host Peter Armstrong hears from voters on what their priorities are and who they think can deliver on them. On The Current. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Canada's housing crisis is affecting the availability of emergency shelter space. Women's Shelters Canada surveyed shelter workers across the country, and it found 97% say it is getting harder to support people fleeing gender-based violence. The CBC's Julie Ireton has more on the story.
No space, no space. You just want somewhere to sleep.
This woman and her children slept in their car and couch surfed after escaping her abusive partner. CBC isn't naming her to protect her safety. She waited months to get into a temporary emergency shelter in Ottawa, but that was more than a year ago. She can't leave because she can't find affordable housing.
A woman should not be here more than 3 months. But when you go to 6 months, 9 months, a year, we lose our mind.
They are staying longer. Anuretta Dougal is Executive Director of Women's Shelters Canada. Her organization recently surveyed shelter workers across the country.
Because there's nowhere for women to go after a shelter, basically it has a bottleneck effect. Women aren't leaving shelters.
Carrie Lewis runs Ottawa's Interval House, a shelter with 10 rooms and 30 beds that are always full.
We had to turn away almost 800. It's a crisis and we need to be doing something about it. But in terms of action, we're not building affordable housing at the rate that we need to.
Lewis's organization is set to construct a new transitional housing unit on the shelter's property. And over the next 4 years, Women's Shelters Canada hopes to help fund the building of 16 secondary housing projects in Canada, including one in New Brunswick and another in northern Alberta. But the advocates say much more affordable housing is needed. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating an overnight incident. Winnipeg police officers shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter. They say he stabbed an officer in the throat during a retail theft investigation. The officer is in stable condition. Karen Pauls has more on the story. And a warning, some of what you hear may be disturbing.
In video posted on social media, 2 police officers can be seen with guns pointed at a man just outside a bus shelter. They're heard yelling as he walks towards them. Get down, man. Drop it. Seconds later, they discharged their firearms. The man fell to the ground. Officers performed CPR on him before he and an injured officer were taken to hospital. Constable Danny McKinnon says plainclothes officers were at Winnipeg's Unicity Mall Sunday evening as part of a retail theft initiative.
Officers voiced over their portable radios that an officer had been stabbed in the throat and a male suspect had been shot.
The senior officer is in stable condition. The other man died in hospital. He has not yet been identified, and police can only say he had an edged weapon. There are still many unanswered questions about what happened. Acting Chief Art Stannard says police are aware of videos posted online.
And we caution the public that they do not show the entire incident. I've said this before, and I'll say this again. Our members do not come to work to take a life. They come to work to serve and protect the community.
The shooting took place an hour before most of the area shops closed, so there were people in the parking lot. Manitoba's police watchdog, the Independent Investigation Unit, has taken over the investigation. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Protesters in Punjab, Pakistan run as police fire tear gas into the crowd. Hundreds of Imran Khan supporters are trying to march to the capital to demand his release from jail. They want the former prime minister to be freed immediately. There have been violent clashes on the outskirts of Islamabad for the past 2 days. Officials have blocked roads leading into the city. Imran Khan is in jail on several corruption charges. He and his supporters say his imprisonment is politically motivated. Political scientists are calling Romania's latest election results a revolt against the establishment. A little-known far-right populist took the lead in yesterday's presidential election, and he will probably face the incumbent leftist prime minister in a runoff vote in 2 weeks.
Įvykio aplinkybės yra tokios, kad
Just outside the capital, Bucharest, this man says he does not know Călin Georgescu. Georgescu ran as an independent and has called NATO's ballistic missile defense shield a shame of diplomacy. His TikTok account is popular. It has 3.6 million likes. Georgescu mostly shares videos of himself going to church, doing judo, and talking on podcasts. At least one expert is suggesting Russian meddling may have given him an edge. Officials in Lithuania say at least one person is dead after a cargo plane crashed into a house.
įvykio aplinkybės yra tokios, kad lėktuvas matyt.
Lithuania's police commissioner says a DHL cargo plane crashed as it was approaching the airport in Vilnius. It skidded into a house and parts of the area caught fire. A member of the flight crew died. 3 other people were taken to hospital. The cause of the crash still not known. Prosecutors in France are demanding the maximum sentence for the man at the center of a rape trial. Gisèle Pellicot's husband admitted that for years he mixed sedatives into his wife's food and drink. He says he raped her and invited dozens of strangers to he recruited online to do the same. 51 men are now being tried in the case. Prosecutors say he should spend 20 years in jail for aggravated rape. That would likely be the rest of his life. The accused turned 72 this week. Today could mark a pivotal moment in the pursuit of freedom for the Menendez brothers. The pair are serving life without parole for the 1989 murder of their parents. A Los Angeles judge will today consider a request by the prosecutors to reduce their sentence. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman has the latest.
The request comes as attorneys say there is new evidence supporting the brothers' claim that they were sexually molested by their father, Jose Menendez. Attorney Mark Garagos.
Under the current state of the law, they're eligible to have, and the court has the discretion to recall the LWOP sentence, life without parole.
Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon says he supports a request to reduce the sentence from life without parole to 50 years to life.
I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board.
Many members of the Menendez family support their release. Ana Maria Baralt is the niece of Jose Menendez.
If Lyle and Eric's case were heard today, with the understanding we now have about abuse, there is no doubt in my mind that their sentencing would have been very different.
If the sentence is reduced, and with the brothers having already served more than 34 years in prison, they would be eligible for parole. But it would still need to be approved by the California Parole Board and the governor. Complicating the issue is the fact that the current district attorney is set to be replaced next month, and the new DA says he needs time to review the case before deciding. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
A Victoria couple says WestJet is trying to silence their efforts to seek compensation. They say they sought advice online after their flight was rebooked by the airline, but a WestJet lawyer intervened. Experts say it's part of a growing and troublesome trend. Erica Johnson has more in this Go Public investigation.
Victoria couple Anna Gurney and her husband Russell had booked WestJet tickets to get to San Diego for a cruise. But the morning of their flight, WestJet rebooked them on a flight leaving 2 days later.
Accepting that itinerary meant we would have missed the cruise ship.
The Gurneys had to book new tickets on a competitor's airline for $1,500 more, then took WestJet to small claims court for compensation. Looking for advice, Anna Gurney posted correspondence with a WestJet lawyer on a Facebook group for air passengers. But the law firm saw it, asked Gurney to remove it, and withdrew a settlement offer for sharing what it called confidential settlement discussions.
This is a prestigious law firm. representing a huge airline. I am feeling frightened.
Even disputes handled by the regulator are shrouded in secrecy. Full Canadian Transportation Agency decisions on airline disputes used to be posted online, but new rules last year made them confidential, aside from some basic details. University of Ottawa prof. Paul Daly.
I think it's probably unconstitutional.
A spokesperson for Transport Canada said the new rules make resolving disputes more efficient. As for WestJet, it told Go Public it was just following the rules and did settle with the Gurneys, but made them sign a non-disclosure agreement to get their money. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime. CBCnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. It's -10 in Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. This hour on the show, we're going to learn about a drive that gets warm boots on people's feet in this province. Stay tuned for that. Also this hour, a really fun story, interesting story. Did you know that Manitoba is home to one of the biggest Latvian Canadian communities in the country? CBC's Emily Brass will share the story of the great Latvian migration to Lac du Bonnet in the early 20th century. And then coming up at 10 to 8 this morning, almost 3 years ago, the Patel family froze to death just meters from the U.S. border. Now 2 men have been convicted of human smuggling in an American court. We're going to hear what happened in the courtroom. Caitlin Gowrluck is back from the States and she's going to join us in studio. First to Heather Wells in our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit is investigating after a man was shot and killed last night by Winnipeg police. Police say officers fired their weapons after an officer was stabbed in the neck. That officer is in hospital in stable condition. We're going to hear from Winnipeg's acting police chief coming up. The grandparents of a teenager who was shot by RCMP in Norway House say they are devastated. Elgin Muskego was shot by RCMP on Friday. Police say he had an edged weapon and was coming towards some officers. We're going to hear from his grandmother coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into weather and traffic with Abby.
It's going to be a cold day throughout the province. The northern regions will be dealing with light snow and chilly temperatures ranging to -20, while western Manitoba, the Red River and Pembina Valley would see snow and wind chill in the range of the chill is going to be feeling like -23 this morning. But for Winnipeg, we're going to see more like cloudy skies, occasional flurries here and there, and temperatures will significantly be warmer compared to other regions in the province. Right now, Winnipeg -10. The clouds will roll in this morning, bringing a good chance of flurries and light snow into the afternoon period. There's also a risk of freeze and drizzle late in the morning. Expect a breezy day. The high will be around -4. Though with the wind chill this morning, it's going to be feeling like -19. In other regions, we're looking at temperatures between -13 and -9 in the Gimli area. But for today, we're starting clear and then becoming cloudy, and we'll see light snow and freezing rain. And then talking about traffic now, that fire Marcy mentioned earlier along the 400 block of Elgin, it closed both ways, east and west. Bound traffic will be impacted, so you need to.
This is in the city. I just want to make the turn because you came off talking the highways. Now we're in the city with the fire on Elgin, right?
Definitely,
okay.
The fire on Elgin. And also another one I just spotted in traffic. We're looking at Canaston and Tuxedo. We have emergency vehicles in the northbound curb lane. Expect significant delays in northbound Canaston this morning. So if you're going down that route, prepare for that.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. That's Elgin at Princess, 400 block. So east and west both closed because of the fire.
That's correct. If you see anything in traffic, let us know. 788-3093.
Well, as I alluded to, let's begin this half hour with news of a new self-guided tour that Heather was mentioning a bit in the news this morning. It's putting the spotlight on the history of the Latvian Canadians in Manitoba. Now, many of the sites to be highlighted are in the Arm of Lac du Bonnet. That area once boasted one of the largest Latvian communities in Canada. CBC reporter Emily Brass recently was in Lac du Bonnet as part of our series Communities in Focus. And Emily and I spoke about this story last week.
Good morning, Marcy.
How did you first hear about Lactobani's significant Latvian-Canadian community?
Well, as we were gearing up to go to Lactobani for Communities in Focus, we put out a call to our listeners to send us story pitches, and we got an email from Riva Carland. She lives on a farm that has been in her family for 4 generations, and Riva is carrying on a lot of the same tasks her great-grandparents did, growing root vegetables like beets, potatoes, garlic, and onions, and raising chickens in the same coop her ancestors used.
Every year that when it comes around, it's like, okay, we're getting chickens again. It just feels normal. But when you stop for a second and think how special it is to be the 4th generation doing that in that same building, it's pretty unique and it's pretty special. So I try to take a moment and not take that for granted every year.
So that coop was built by her great-grandfather, Peter Carland, who settled in the area in 1912. And he established a homestead in the little hamlet of Lithuania, about 20 kilometers northeast of the town of Lactobani. That name, Lithuania, translates to Little Latvia, and it was named because so many Latvians set up homes there.
Who knew, right? I love these stories. So how big was the Latvian community in the Lactobani area then?
Well, just before World War II, Lactobani had the biggest Latvian population in Canada west of Toronto. And the community might not hold that claim anymore, but their numbers are still significant. If you drive around town, you'll see long-standing businesses like Osis Building Supplies and Dancit's Fine Foods, which are some of the Latvian names in that region. And many of the local Latvian Canadian families came during a wave of immigration in the early 1900s, including Riva's great-grandfather, Peter Carland. He was one of many who left Latvia to escape political unrest. Russian Tsarist forces cracked down on people they perceived as a threat, and thousands of Latvians were imprisoned, exiled, and executed. Now, Riva's Aunt Susan was born in 1952. She grew up on that family farm, and she remembers a lot of her grandfather's stories about those days.
He was under threat of his life being taken, and he stowed away on a ship, came to Canada, homesteaded here in 1912 or 13. He had 2 sons here with my grandmother. He sent for her in about 1913 because they needed brides. He did the usual homesteading where you clear land and you build a house and then you're given the title to the property.
And you said that your grandfather didn't expect to stay?
No, they came here to seek refuge, and he thought that it was going to be better in Latvia after the Russians took over, but that wasn't the case. And when he finally realized it, he lost a few friends that would go back to check out the situation, and he would never hear from them again. And then I guess he just turned his back and said, you know what, this is where we're going to be living, and we just grew up knowing that we would be Canadian.
Were they able to keep in touch with their family back home?
Sadly, Peter and Olga Carland never saw their loved ones in Latvia again. And the family couldn't even send mail back home for fear of reprisal, and letters to Canada were sent with extreme caution. Susan says relatives in Latvia never, ever wrote down the address for Peter Carland in Lithuania. They passed it down verbally so he wouldn't be found by Russian authorities. The Carlands still have some of those letters, and Riva paid a translator to read them.
I paid somebody from Latvia to do a FaceTime call with me to try to translate some of these letters. And the way they were just amazed. They were saying, my hand is so weak, I can hardly hold the quill. I'm ill with whatever sickness. And it was just these really haunting, beautiful letters. They're so incredible. So they barely were able to keep in touch. And there's even one envelope it's stamped, inspected by USSR officials. It was a really rough time trying to find your family again in Latvia.
So the Carlands did what many Latvians did and helped build up a strong community here in Manitoba. In fact, Riva and Susan say a lot of people left that country and set out not just for Canada, but specifically for Lactobani, because they heard a lot of Latvians were settling there.
Let's go back to what I said at the beginning, Emily. Now their stories are going to be told in a new self-guided tour?
Yes, the Lactobani and District Historical Society is curating a tour featuring family farms and other noteworthy locations connected to Latvian Manitoban history. I spoke with Terry Tottle from the Historical Society, and he says thousands of immigrants came to Lactobani and the surrounding areas in the early 1900s to find work, because that's when several hydro generating stations were being built along the Winnipeg River in Pinawa, Pointe du Bois, Slave Falls, and Great Falls.
It was difficult to get people from Winnipeg to come, and they advertised in the local papers, and up to 2,000 men were employed, and mostly Eastern Europeans and Scandinavians came, And after the construction of the generating stations were completed, they learned that they could get homesteads. This was the last area in the province to get homesteads up until 1930. So they were able to acquire 160 acres for $10, and it was very similar to the land back home.
Pretty nice price there.
No doubt, yeah.
It doesn't compare to current times at all. So, but that's one element that'll be featured in the new booklet and self-guided tour called Latvian Heritage Trail, Footprints from Winnipeg to Lac du Bonny. And it'll also feature sites here in the capital city, as well as Lithuania, Lee River, and Libau.
So what else might people see and learn about on the, as you said, Latvian Heritage Trail?
Well, one of the stops will be the Carland homestead, where several buildings put up by Riva's great-grandfather are still standing. We mentioned the chicken coop earlier. But there's also the family's original dwelling, which is this tiny log cabin that's now being used as a shed, and the barn that was built by Peter Carland in the early 1900s with help from his neighbors. It's made of hand-hewn logs that are held together by hand-cut dovetails, and so there's no nails. And Susan says the reason it's still in good shape, while most of the other old homestead buildings in the area are not, is that her father later had the foresight to put a tin roof on it. So the barn is listed in the Manitoba Historical Society's archives as an example of the construction style used by early Latvian settlers. It's also attracted some noteworthy guests over the years, including the Latvian ambassador to Canada, and Susan Carland got to be his tour guide.
It was very exciting. He visited the cemetery, but he also wanted to visit the Carland homestead because of the barn, and we have pictures of him in front of the barn. Also a few other Latvian buildings that were on the road on the way here, and yeah, it was very, very exciting. It made me feel really special. I think it made the whole community feel special. And then we entertained him at the museum. We also made him a typical Latvian brunch, and yeah, he thoroughly enjoyed it. I wished he had had more time, but he was in Winnipeg sending the troops from Shiloh to Latvia. Yeah, it was a whirlwind tour. But the ambassador before him had also visited. So we've had two of the Latvian ambassadors in this area.
And Susan mentioned the Lithuania Cemetery, which will also be a stop on the new self-guided tour. And not only are the Carlands buried there, but so many local Latvian ancestors. And some of the headstones are even inscribed in Old Latvian. And that Latvian Heritage Trail is slated to launch in January.
Thanks a lot, Emily. What a lovely story.
I know. Such a nice piece of history. It's good to hear about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing it in.
Thank you.
Emily Brass is a reporter here at CBC Manitoba. She visited Lac du Bonny this fall as part of our series Communities in Focus.
Feels like time goes by slowly, then out of the blue you're 25. They ask, when do the kids come? But I'm just a big kid inside. I can't believe they want us to have it all figured out by 18. 'Cause looking back, I didn't know who I wanted to be. Slow down, take your time. Wish someone that told me to slow down once you blink. You're 25 My taxman tells me to keep all of my expenses organized, but I'll go a full day without eating before I even realize I can't believe they want us to have it all figured out by 30. 'Cause looking round, I'm thinking I'm just Take your time. Wish someone had told me to slow down. 'Cause once you blink, you're 25.
We're listening to Sarah Kay with 25 from Lake Helen First Nation. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Time right now is 7:26 minus 10. Winds are calm in Winnipeg, and it is time for morning sports. Good morning to Scott Regerer.
Marcia, I hear her say once you blink, you're 25. Do you find as you get older, you feel like you're getting older more quickly? Does things speed up in life?
Oh,
for you
sure.
or not?
Yeah, for sure. You'll be like, wow, I haven't talked to you in 3 years. And then all of a sudden you're like, when you're younger, you can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
good thing is last forever.
Yeah, right.
They don't anymore.
Good thing is with good friends, it doesn't matter if you haven't talked a number of years, right?
That's also true. Also true. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Jets back in action tonight. They continue their longest road trip of the season.
They do. The Jets at the midpoint of this 6-game road trip, Marcy. After splitting their first 2 games against Pittsburgh and Nashville, they'll face possibly their toughest opponent in the Minnesota Wild. As great a start to the season as Winnipeg has had, Minnesota's kept pace with them. It should be a defensive battle tonight, you would think. Connor Hellebuck and Philip Gustafsson have been 2 of the best keepers in the league. And Minnesota and Winnipeg have been among the league leaders in preventing goals. Now, if there's one area Winnipeg could have an advantage in, that's the special teams battle. Winnipeg has the top power play in the league, after all, while the Wild have been one of the worst while on the penalty kill. So that is something to look out for with the puck drop tonight. Jets and Wild, 7 o'clock.
Raptors up against the NBA's top team last night. How'd that go?
About the way you would expect against a Cleveland team that entered the game 16-1, Marcy. Toronto played well in spurts and were within 6 heading into the final quarter, but then the Cavaliers' superstar Donovan Mitchell turned things up a notch, and the Raptors did not have a reply. Here is Toronto coach Darko Rajakovic.
Outside of the slow start, when we just did not have enough energy and enough force, after that, I thought that we played very competitive game against a really good team. To be honest with you, I wish we can play this team every week because playing with them, it would make us better, and we're learning a lot.
I don't know if they want to play the Cavaliers every week, but I see what the coach is saying there. They have not yet won on the road through 8 games this season, Marcy. Toronto, they will try for their first win away from home tonight as they're right back at it against the Detroit Pistons.
Let's finish with swimming, where one of the world's best is hanging up her goggles.
Alexiak's running out of real estate on the way home here. She's closing. It is Emma McKeon. Emma McKeon for gold. And Penny Alexiak misses the medal.
CBC's call of Emma McKeon winning gold at the Tokyo Olympics, Marcy. It was one of 7 medals she claimed in Japan. That's the most ever by a female swimmer at a single games. And McKeon announced her retirement this morning.
It was something I'd kind of been thinking about for a while. Didn't want to think about it too much in the lead up to Paris, but the time since then has kind of given me the chance to pause for a bit and reflect on my whole career. I'll never be far from swimming, whether that's actually being in the pool or not. Who knows?
Now, longtime rival Penny Oleksiak and rising star Summer McIntosh, Marcy, would probably prefer McKeon contributes to the sport outside of the pool in the future. As you heard in that play-by-play from Tokyo, Canadians have felt the brunt of her excellence many, many times. McKeon with 14 Olympic medals over her career. Only Katie Ledecky, the great American, has claimed more.
Thanks very much, Scott. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
That's Scott Regerer with Morning Sports. I want to mention a couple things in traffic here. The 400 block of Elgin is closed both east and west. That's right around Princess. Use an alternate route. The issues on Kenaston have cleared now. Westbound Portage Avenue between Strathcona and Empress is going to be reduced to 1 lane today. So note that this is to accommodate hydro work around Omans Creek. And this is going to last till March 2025. So get used to it and find alternate routes. If you live in the area, you'll likely already have understood what your access is going to look like. And stay with us, because after after your CBC News. We're going to talk more about Warm Boots, Warm Hearts. They've been helping people in community for years. They just gave away pair number 1,000 when it comes to boots. So stay tuned. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, we are still at -10. It is exactly a month until Christmas, and our temperature is right about seasonal for this time of year. A high today of -4. Good chance of flurries through the day and a risk of freezing drizzle late this morning. Winnipeg police shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter in Unicity Mall last night after they say he stabbed an officer in the throat.
Went down, man. Drop it.
Police say plainclothes officers were there as part of a retail theft initiative. Acting Police Chief Art Stannard says the man had an edged weapon and wouldn't put it down. Stannard says he's aware of videos on social media showing police shooting the man.
We are aware of videos online, and we caution the public that they do not show the entire incident. I've said this before, and I'll say this again. Our members do not come to work to take a life. They come to work to serve and protect the community.
The officer who was stabbed is in stable condition. Manitoba's police watchdog has taken over the investigation. The grandparents of a teenager shot by RCMP in Norway House say they are devastated. Elgin Muskego was shot by RCMP on Friday. Police say the 17-year-old had an edged weapon and was coming towards some officers. Kathy Edaway-Capo says the teen suffered from mental health issues and had been using drugs, but adds he was turning his life around.
It's been so difficult without him, without seeing him here. He wouldn't be here right now. If he was alive, he'd be in my home. I don't know why it was necessary to kill him, to shoot him.
Manitoba's police watchdog has taken over that investigation. Norway House says it is also working on its own investigation into Elgin's death. The former civilian director of Manitoba's police watchdog wants to know why it hasn't made some necessary changes. 3 years ago, the former Progressive Conservative government introduced a bill to make changes to the province's Independent Investigation Unit. That is the body that investigates all serious incidents involving police. The changes would have introduced jail time or fines for police officers who do not comply with requests from the unit. It also would have created community liaisons to work with families involved in investigations. Zane Tesler left his role last year and is frustrated the legislation still hasn't been proclaimed.
It was designed to enhance the powers of the IIU. There's no rational reason why it's sitting there.
Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says the delay is because the bill is complex, but he says he is committed to implementing the changes. The Manitoba Nurses Union wants AI detectors in hospitals right across the province. President Darlene Jackson says nurses felt safer while the Health Sciences Centre tested them earlier this year.
We're seeing more and more weapons, and we're hearing from more and more nurses who are talking about the unsafe situations in their workplaces and feeling unsafe.
A letter from an anonymous HSC nurse was discussed at the Manitoba Legislature on Friday. The nurse claims staff have found many dangerous objects this year, including a crowbar. Jackson says safer workplaces will lead to more people staying in the profession. Premier Wab Kinew says his government is listening to the nurses and has hired more than 100 safety officers since coming into office. Canada's housing crisis is affecting the availability of emergency shelter space. Women's Shelters Canada surveyed shelter workers right across the country, and it found 97% say it is getting harder to support people who are fleeing gender-based violence. You can hear more on that story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Well, while Western Manitoba is covered in snow, Winnipeg, not so much. That's the Windsor Park Nordic Centre making its own snow. More than a dozen people got together over the weekend to operate some new snowmaking equipment, $200,000 worth. Manager Laurie Penton says without the volunteers, they never could have pulled this off.
It's a dream that's been for 15 or more years, and now that it's finally
Here, we're so thrilled about the future and what it could do to a reliable ski season for our ski programs.
Penton hopes the Windsor Park Nordic Centre will be open for skiers in just a couple weeks. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Ada Wells.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's look at the regional forecast at this point. -10 in Winnipeg. It's clear outside. We should expect cloudy conditions today. A good chance of flurries with a risk of freezing drizzle later in the day. It will feel breezy at some point, and we'll see a high of -4 in the city today. Tonight, the cloud will continue, and then that flurries will continue into the evening period. As we head west to Brandon, -13 seems to be the situation out there. We're seeing light snow. This would continue throughout the day. You will get to feel some freezing drizzle here and there, and then the high would only be around a -11. Thompson is at -14 at this time. Similar condition to Brandon. You're getting light snow. This will continue through the day. Temperatures will only warm up to around -11, though with the wind chill factored in, it feels like -16. Further north in Churchill, -10. Light snow you're seeing at this time. Flurries expected later in the day. You'd get to a high of -9, though with the wind chill factored in, it feels like -20. Dauphin is sitting at -11 with some light snow blowing at this time. Expect cloudy conditions to come with that. You will notice some freezing drizzle in the forecast also today. It will stay cold with a high of -7, though with the wind chill factored in, it feels like -18. Gimli is at -9. The Interlake region will see more like cloudy conditions today. There's a chance of flurries in the forecast. Freezing drizzle also will be felt here and there, and that would continue into the day. The winds will pick up, becoming breezy from the west, and the high would only reach -4. Though with the wind chill factored in this morning, it actually feels like -18, and as you get into the afternoon period, it only feels like -10. Steinbach is at -10 and partly cloudy. You're seeing this would grow into more clouds as we get into the day. There is a chance of flurries in the forecast and some freezing drizzle later in the day. A high will be around a -2. The wind chill makes it feel like -22 this morning. Morris is sitting at -15. Looking at the Pembina Valley region, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds, which will give way to cloudy skies as you get into the day. And then we see some breezy conditions, and that flurries will stay with you for most of the day. High only around -6. So we're looking at but for tomorrow in most of the regions, we should be seeing cloudy conditions and a mix of sun and clouds. Compared to Winnipeg, where other parts of the province are kind of feeling cold, Winnipeg would more like be seeing like a milder temperature if you compare it to the northern area and the Westman region. Though it's going to start clear this morning, and then we're going to see the flurries rolling and some chilly breezy conditions later. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -10.
Now, we have had a couple issues in traffic, but some have already cleared. So Keniston's clear, Elgin is not, right?
That's correct.
So Elgin is, sorry, Abby, did you say this right after the news? I stepped out of the
No,
studio.
I did not. I started with the weather.
Okay, great. So the 400 block of Elgin still closed east and west. There was a fire in the area, or is a fire. So that's right around Princess. Use an alternate route for that one. Just want to note that. And also want to note that the highways in those areas where Abby's mentioning could also be problematic, right? Because it's still a little slick and slippery out there. Westbound Portage Avenue, also between Strathcona and Empress, is going to be reduced to one lane starting today. They're starting this hydro work, Manitoba hydro work around Omans Creek. I'm mentioning it is because this is going to be the first day of a long stretch. It's not going to be done till March next year. So get used to the detours and the various ways you're going to be getting in and out of neighborhood as well. 788-3093 to reach Abby with traffic and to reach the show and give us an update on your commute. Well, if you commute by foot, isn't it nice when you have a warm pair of boots and a place to wiggle your toes safely? A lot of people in our community don't have that. As temperatures continue to drop, many of us are swapping our favorite fall gear for those winter necessities. For 6 years, Warm Boots, Warm Hearts has been helping Winnipeggers access new and gently used winter boots. They just gave away pair number 1,000. It's a milestone for the small charity, but founder Robin Brown says it's also a bittersweet moment, and she's with us via Zoom this morning. Hello to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So tell me about feeling bittersweet about this.
Yeah, it's bittersweet because in a perfect world, a program like ours wouldn't have to exist. You know, we always wish that everyone had the capacity to have a pair of warm, sturdy footwear to keep them, warm all winter. But the reality is there's a lot of folks that are in need for different reasons. So we started our boot drive sort of by accident in 2019, and we celebrate the milestone now. Instead of looking at how many people we've had to help, we look at it as how many people we've been able to help because of all the community members that have come together to donate and support other people with us.
What led you to start this, as you said, almost by accident those years ago?
Yeah, at the time I was operating a family resource center in a school division in Winnipeg. And we had a parent call one day because there had been a big snowstorm the night before, and they asked if we happened to have any boots or ski pants to help them get their children to school because they didn't have anything available. And there was honestly too much snow to get through on foot without those items. So we didn't have anything on hand, and I went home and I kind of just went on my personal social media and asked if anyone happened to have a pair of boots or ski pants in these particular sizes. And a bunch of people wrote back, like, I don't have this size, but I have this size. Would you be able to use it? And I thought, okay, well, I'm sure I can find someone else that would use it. So I just started collecting a few pairs. And then someone said, like, oh, do you have a donation spot I can give to? And I came home and I said to my husband, I think we accidentally started a charity, but we're going to make this work. We're going to just, coordinate this. We'll do some pickups. We'll do some drop-offs. And our goal the very first year was maybe we could help 50 people, and we surpassed it right away.
What have you heard over the years about what people do in our community when they don't have boots? What do they put on their feet?
We've seen a lot of interesting people have actually shown us what they've used before they've received a pair from us. We've seen things like duct tape with garbage bags. We've seen, like those old school rubber galoshes over top of boots that have like full on, we call them talking boots, where the heels are right off the bottom. We've seen people wearing like multiple socks with different holes to try and use something like summer sandals that they will duct tape around their foot, all sorts of different things. So it's really nice that we can sort of give a sense of pride with a new pair of boots for these people to keep warm.
What sizes are most in demand? What do your needs look like?
We accept sizes from like toddler all the way up to adult, but we often find that our biggest gap is in higher youth sizes and particularly larger men's and women's sizes. We work with a lot of schools and community organizations that have like teenagers that can sometimes be as big as like a men's size 14 or 15 or a women's size 11 or 12. And they have a hard time accessing those sizes in other avenues. So we find that that's often where our demand comes in because we have a lot of those people coming to us when they've exhausted other resources.
We should mention, obviously, we're focusing on the boots, Robin, but you guys also are in need of socks as well, right?
Yeah, we also accept new warm socks because we do like to put a couple pairs in the bags whenever we can. And we also accept hand and foot warmer packs that we'll often give out to folks to keep warm with their new boots. And we also accept new boot laces because sometimes when we get used ones, we try to relace them with a new pair just to freshen them up.
All these years later, then what's the reaction to quote unquote accidentally starting a charity? What's it given back to you to help in this way?
You know what? We started it just with our little family. We were three family members at the time. We've since welcomed our daughter. And actually, our kids really help out a lot with it now. Like we have an almost 4-year-old and we have a 13-year-old. They help us with the cleaning, the packing, the deliveries. My husband does a lot of the coordinating between deliveries and pickups. And it's something we've actually started to look forward to every year as a family. And we really like being able to show our children that, maybe just helping one person can really make a difference. And we hope that, that's what they grow and pass on to others too.
Where can people go if they want to help out or learn more about warm boots, warm hearts?
Yeah, we have a social media. It's at Warm Boots WPG, Warm Boots Winnipeg. We're on Instagram there, and they can find a list of places that are our donation partners where they can drop items off. They can also send us an email at warmbootswarmhearts@gmail.com, and they can ask any questions they have about donations or if someone is needing to receive a pair. And they can also send us a DM on social media as well.
Thanks a lot for this, Robin, and being up on Zoom with CBC with us early this morning. Take care. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You as well. That's Robin Brown, founder of Warm Boots, Warm Hearts.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
I've been thinking about the way we get so deep, it gets to me. And the look of surprise when our faces greet, it gets to me. Ooh, I wanna give you more. If there's one thing I can afford, wanna hold you close to me. Tell me what you wanna do. Tell me what you wanna do. Tell me what you wanna do. There's no reason to rush, you know I want slow love or get to know ya. When it's feeling too much, or keep it true, you know I won't assume. Ooh, I wanna give you more. If there's one thing I can afford, won't you open up to me? Tell me what you wanna do. Tell me what you wanna do. Tell me what you wanna do. There's one thing I can afford, wanna hold you close to me. Think of what we're gonna do. Think of what we're gonna do. Think of what we're gonna do. Maybe there's a way we can spend the day talking like lovers should. Maybe there's a way we can spend the day talking like lovers would. Maybe there's a way we could spend the day talking like lovers should. Maybe there's a way we could spend the day talking like lovers would. Maybe there's a way. Maybe there's a way. There's a way. Talking like lovers should. Maybe there's a way.
Luis Sanchez, this is their debut single. If you're digging it, expect more. It's called One Thing I Can Afford. And the debut self-titled EP, The One Thing I Can Afford, is out now. It's 11 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team. Well, speaking of affording things, the city of Winnipeg might be in some financial trouble. Last week, City Council shared its rainy day fund has been drained. That puts the city in uncharted territory. To talk about it, Finance Committee Chair Jeff Berwadi is going to be in with us after 8 o'clock about how we got here and what needs to happen moving forward in the city. So stay tuned for that live interview. Right now, though, after hearing 4 days of arguments and testimony, it only took the jury about an hour to convict Steve Shand and Harshkumar Patel. Shand and Patel are the human smugglers whose actions contributed to the deaths of a family of 4 from India. The Patel family, no relation, by the way, to Harshkumar Patel, were sent across a snowy Manitoba field during a January blizzard in 2022. They were trying to cross from our province into Minnesota. Jagdish Patel, his wife Vaishaliben, their 11-year-old daughter Vyangi, and their 3-year-old son Dharmeek all died. They froze to death trying to find the van that was driven by Steve Shand, who was sent to pick them up. CBC's Caitlin Garlick has been in Fergus Falls, Minnesota for the trial. She just got back over the weekend. She joins us this morning in studio with her final report on what's been happening down there. I shouldn't say final, but maybe final for this stretch. Hi there.
Good morning.
So can you tell us about some of the evidence that was presented by prosecutors in the case, Caitlin?
Yeah, so first of all, there were records, things that they said showed kind of the when and where of where the accused organized or made these smuggling trips. And I'll remind our listeners, too, that that wasn't just the trip where the Patel family died. There were several others kind of in the weeks leading up to that as well with other people. So that evidence included things like cell phone location data, there was flight records, car rental records, bank records showing large deposits being made, sort of a bunch of little things that prosecutors used to piece together this story of what happened. We also saw text and WhatsApp messages between the two accused. So that showed both when these trips were happening, because we saw messages that were exchanged kind of around the same dates as these flights and car rentals and trips to and from the borders. But it also showed what they were talking about. So that included discussions about the extreme cold conditions back in December of 2021, January 2022. And as early as the very first trip in December, we see one of the accused say to the other, "Are they going to be alive when they get here?" We also see Google Translate searches from Steve Shand's phone around one of the trips before the Patel family died. And it translates several messages into Hindi saying things like, "I think she may be hypothermic." So it suggests kind of even on those previous smuggling trips before the Patels froze to death, the smugglers knew the risks of the cold because they saw them really play out right in front of them, right? We also saw photos, so including one of the survivors of that group who crossed with the Patel family, who had really, really serious frostbite, discoloration on her face, on her nose, around her eyes, swelling in her hands, really sort of graphic photos of that. And we saw photos of the Patel family when they were alive and also then in the area where they were found, which was really one of the more heartbreaking parts of a pretty difficult trial. We saw Jagdish, the dad, with his kids. He was kind of, covering his son's face, trying to protect him from the cold. We saw the 3-year-old wrapped in a blanket with like ducks and stars on it. Not a warm blanket, just a regular kid's blanket. And the dad's jacket was open, like he maybe was trying to protect his son from the cold, right? And then a little ways away from that, too, we saw the mom, Vaishali, near a fence and sort of slumped over. There was a building on the other side, as if maybe she'd wandered away trying to find help for her family and just wasn't able to do that. And the photos also show clearly that none of them were properly dressed for the cold they were all in. We know that the autopsies determined all 4 died from hypothermia, and the forensic pathologist from Winnipeg who testified at the trial said that the family's bodies were so frozen that it was days before the autopsies could even be performed.
I have goosebumps listening to you describe all of this. It's so sad. What did we hear from some of the witnesses who testified during the trial?
So there were a lot of different witnesses, a lot of different types of witnesses. We heard from different law enforcement who either responded to the scene at the border, who found the Patels there, who later investigated the smuggling ring. And they all sort of detailed how they pieced this story together. We also heard, though, from a couple of other witnesses who shed some light on what happened the night the Patel family died. One of those people actually was a convicted human smuggler, someone who was involved in similar operations, Rajinder Pal Singh. He says he ran a smuggling operation in BC, so separate from this one. But he said that around the time the Patel family was brought to the Manitoba border, he was in touch with another smuggler named Fennel Patel, who he says brought the family to the border that night. And Singh told the court that Fennel Patel told him the Patel family called him for help, and he told them to turn around that night, go back to Canada. Nobody went to save them, though. We also heard from one of the survivors, so somebody else who was with the group the Patel family was with that night, Yash Patel. So he was dropped at the border with the Patels to cross over that night. And he actually did make it over to the vehicle that was supposed to pick them up, which was driven by Steve Shand. And he talked about how quickly the group got separated in the blizzard that night, right? How bad the conditions were and how scared he was, but how he knew he just had to keep walking to try to make it to the vehicle waiting on the other side of the border, and how somehow he was able to find it.
What kind of evidence or arguments did the defense then try and mount for Steve Shand and for Harsh Kumar Patel?
So neither defense presented any evidence of its own, and neither of the accused chose to testify, but we know they both pleaded not guilty, right? So we did hear arguments about what they say really happened, and it was two very different stories. So we'll start with Steve Shand. He was the driver who was arrested near the border the same day the Patel family was found, and he also had Yash Patel and another of the migrants in his van at that time. His lawyers say he was a cab driver in Florida who basically just got duped by his co-accused into participating in the smuggling scheme. They said he was offered a chance to make some money driving people for Harsh Kumar Patel, and he just didn't realize what was really happening until it was too late. And Harsh Kumar Patel, on the other hand, his lawyers told a totally different story. They say he was misidentified and wrongfully accused of being part of the smuggling ring. So I'll remind our listeners, too, that he was only arrested actually earlier this year. And his lawyers said that unlike with Steve Shand, there was no evidence presented that Harsh Kumar Patel was ever near the border. And his lawyers also said that prosecutors were wrong in alleging a contact saved in Steve Shand's phone was him. So the contact for that person in the phone wasn't a real name. It was saved as Dirty Harry. But that's who all those text messages were with around the smuggling trips. Prosecutors provided evidence, though, that Harsh Kumar Patel had previously used that same phone number on a government document. So that was sort of part of how they linked him to the smuggling operation.
You also, Caitlin, spoke to one of the jurors outside of the courthouse. What did he tell you?
So that man's name was Kevin Paul, and he sounded like he just, and along with the other jurors as well, it sounded like they were just really convinced by the evidence the prosecutors presented. He said there wasn't really a ton to discuss. And he also noted that all of the jurors in that room were really moved and just saddened by the Patel family story. He said that he grew up in North Dakota, so sort of a similar area, similar climate near the border. And so he said he knows how brutal the winters there can be. And he said, I just couldn't imagine having to do what they did out there that night. So he said he really did feel that justice was served in this case.
I know, Caitlin, you also did hear from U.S. justice officials. So they spoke after the verdict was read. I'm just mindful of our time here. So it's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. We're going to come back to this part of the story after 8 o'clock with Caitlin Gowerluck, who is in studio with us to share more details of her trip to down south to Minnesota to cover this case. Caitlin Gowerluck is a reporter with CBC Manitoba. So we're going to hear more about this final day in court coming up right here on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Thank you for part one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's go right to Heather Wells to find out what other news is developing.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit is investigating after a man was shot and killed last night by Winnipeg police. It happened at Unicity Shopping Centre outside a bus shack there. Police say an officer on the scene was stabbed in the throat. That officer is in hospital in stable condition. We'll bring you the latest on what happened. The head of the Manitoba Nurses Union isn't surprised another healthcare worker is concerned about rising violence. On Friday, an anonymous letter written by a Veteran Health Sciences Centre nurse was discussed at the legislature. The nurse says their family's worried about their safety after dangerous objects made their way into the unit this year. Darlene Jackson wants AI detectors in hospitals across the province. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
-10 and mostly cloudy in Winnipeg. 400 block of Elgin around Princess closed. There's an early morning fire. And also Portage Avenue westbound between Strathcona and Empress is reduced to one lane. Stay with us. We're going to talk to Jeff Brawadi, councillor, about why the city's rainy day fund has run dry and where to go from here.
With Tom Power. The whole time Henry Winkler was playing the Fonz on Happy Days, he was also struggling with a learning disability. Henry will tell you how his life changed after being diagnosed with dyslexia and how it led to him becoming a best-selling author of children's books. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Voters in Nova Scotia go to the polls tomorrow, and there's a lot at stake.
From healthcare to housing, affordability to immigration. Guest host Peter Armstrong hears from voters on what their priorities are and who they think can deliver on them. On The Current, in half an hour.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Canada's housing crisis is affecting the availability of emergency shelter space. Women's Shelter Canada surveyed shelter workers across the country, and it found 97% say it is getting harder to support people fleeing gender-based violence. The CBC's Julie Ireton has more on the story.
No space, no space. You just want somewhere to sleep.
This woman and her children slept in their car and couch surfed after escaping her abusive partner. CBC isn't naming her to protect her safety. She waited months to get into a temporary emergency shelter in Ottawa, but that was more than a year ago. She can't leave because she can't find affordable housing.
A woman should not be here more than 3 months. But when you go to 6 months, 9 months, a year, we lose our mind.
They are staying longer. Anurada Dougal is Executive Director of Women's Shelters Canada. Her organization recently surveyed shelter workers across the country.
Because there's nowhere for women to go after a shelter, basically it has a bottleneck effect. Women aren't leaving shelters.
Carrie Lewis runs Ottawa's Interval House, a shelter with 10 rooms and 30 beds that are always full.
We had to turn away almost 800. It's a crisis and we need to be doing something about it. But in terms of action, we're not building affordable housing at the rate that we need to.
Lewis's organization is set to construct a new transitional housing unit on the shelter's property. And over the next 4 years, Women's Shelters Canada hopes to help fund the building of 16 secondary housing projects in Canada, including one in New Brunswick and another in northern Alberta. But the advocates say much more affordable housing is needed. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Police will be on high alert today in Montreal as NATO wraps up its annual summit. On Friday night, a demonstration resulted in burned cars, shattered windows, and arrests. And now another disturbing incident has surfaced on social media. Vanessa Lee has the details.
Politicians from Montreal's mayor to the prime minister called the situation appalling and condemned the violence. Friday night's anti-NATO, pro-Palestinian protest made international headlines after some demonstrators smashed windows and set cars on fire. Montreal police say they arrested 3 people for obstructing their work. One of the 3 is also accused of assaulting an officer.
We had 3, 4, 5 different demonstrations. Honestly, most of them, 90% of them went really well. But at the end, we have a group that was organized. It wasn't there for the cause. It was there just to destroy.
At a separate pro-Palestinian demonstration the day before, organized by different groups, a woman was filmed making a Nazi salute and chanting,
"Final solution is coming your way."
The Second Cup cafe chain has identified her as the franchisee of a location at Montreal's Jewish General Hospital. They've now canceled her contract. A company statement reads, Second Cup has zero tolerance for hate speech. In coordination with the hospital, we've shut down the franchisee's cafe and are terminating their franchise agreement. Montreal police say they're not aware of any case opened at its hate crimes and incidents unit over the past couple of days, but added they are expecting more arrests after Friday's clashes. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Protesters in Punjab, Pakistan run as police fire tear gas into the crowd. Hundreds of Imran Khan supporters are trying to march to the capital to demand his release. They want the former prime minister to be freed immediately. There have been violent clashes on the outskirts of Islamabad for the past 2 days. Officials have blocked roads leading into the city. Schools have been closed, gatherings have been banned, and even some mobile and internet service has been disrupted by Pakistan's government. Imran Khan is in jail on several corruption charges. He and his supporters say his imprisonment is politically motivated. At least 17 people are missing after a tourist yacht sank in the Red Sea early this morning. It happened near Egypt's coastal town of Mars Alam. The ship had just set out on a 5-day trip despite warnings of turbulence and high waves. 28 people were rescued. Some had to be airlifted to safety while others were rescued by boats. The yacht was carrying 31 tourists and 14 crew. Officials have not released the nationalities of the 17 people who are missing. Georgia's government is opposing a new session of parliament. They're opening a new session of parliament, but the country's ceremonial president and the opposition lawmakers are staging a boycott. They are outside the parliament building with thousands of other protesters. They say the election was stolen. Here is opposition politician Georgi Vijodze.
We do not recognize the election results because it was a special operation driven by Russia against Georgian interests.
Georgia's election commission officially says the Georgian Dream Party won 54% of the vote in the last election, but 2 U.S. pollsters commissioned by the opposition have said the result is statistically impossible. Today could mark a pivotal moment in the pursuit of freedom for the Menendez brothers. The pair are serving life without parole for the 1989 murder of their parents. A Los Angeles judge will today consider a request by prosecutors to reduce their sentence. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman has the latest.
The request comes as attorneys say there is new evidence supporting the brothers' claim that they were sexually molested by their father, Jose Menendez. Attorney Mark Garagos.
Under the current state of the law, they're eligible to have, and the court has the discretion to recall the LWOP sentence, life without parole.
Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon says he supports a request to reduce the sentence from life without parole to 50 years to life.
I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board.
Many members of the Menendez family support their release. Ana Maria Baralt is the niece of Jose Menendez.
If Lyle and Eric's case were heard today, with the understanding we now have about abuse, there is no doubt in my mind that their sentencing would have been very different.
If the sentence is reduced, and with the brothers having already served more than 34 years in prison, they would be eligible for parole. But it would still need to be approved by the California Parole Board and the governor. Complicating the issue is the fact that the current district attorney is set to be replaced next month, and the new DA says he needs time to review the case before deciding. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating a shooting overnight in Winnipeg. Officials say a Winnipeg police officer was stabbed in the throat during a retail theft investigation. An officer shot and killed the suspect. The suspect was given CPR at the scene and later pronounced dead at hospital. He has not been identified. The wounded police officer is in hospital in stable condition. A Victoria couple says WestJet is trying to silence their efforts to seek compensation. They say they sought advice online after their flight was rebooked by the airline, but a WestJet lawyer intervened. Experts say it is part of a growing and troublesome trend. Erica Johnson has more in this Go Public investigation.
Victoria couple Anna Gurney and her husband Russell had booked WestJet tickets to get to San Diego for a cruise. But the morning of their flight, WestJet rebooked them on a flight leaving 2 days later.
Accepting that itinerary meant we would have missed the cruise ship.
The Gurneys had to book new tickets on a competitor's airline for $1,500 more, then took WestJet to small claims court for compensation. Looking for advice, Anna Gurney posted correspondence with a WestJet lawyer on a Facebook group for air passengers. But the law firm saw it, asked Gurney to remove it, and withdrew a settlement offer for sharing what it called confidential settlement discussions.
This is a prestigious law firm representing a huge airline. I am feeling frightened.
Even disputes handled by the regulator are shrouded in secrecy. Full Canadian Transportation Agency decisions on airline disputes used to be posted online, but new rules last year made them confidential, aside from some basic details. University of Ottawa prof Paul Daly.
I think it's probably unconstitutional.
A spokesperson for Transport Canada said the new rules make resolving disputes more efficient. As for WestJet, it told Go Public it was just following the rules and did settle with the Gurneys, but made them sign a non-disclosure agreement to get their money. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And this is the most read story at cbcnews.ca. It is on our main page. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Thanks for being with us. Well, it only took the jury about an hour to convict human smugglers whose actions contributed to the deaths of a family of 4 from India. And this is after 4 days of arguments and testimony. This half hour, we continue to walk through the details of the case with CBC Manitoba's Caitlin Gowerlich, who was in the courtroom. And we're going to hear specifically what U.S. justice officials had to say after the verdict was read. In addition, this half hour on the show, the city of Winnipeg might be in some trouble. Last week, City Council shared that its rainy day fund had been drained. It puts the city in uncharted territory. We're going to talk to Finance Committee Chair Jeff Berwadi about how we got here and also what needs to happen to fix it. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells for other news that's developing. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg police officers shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter near Unicity Mall last night. Police say the man had stabbed another officer in the throat during a retail theft investigation. In video on social media, 2 police officers can be seen with their guns pointed at a man outside that bus shelter. We're going to hear from Acting Police Chief Art Stannard coming up. The grandparents of a teen who was shot by RCMP in Norway House say they are devastated. Elgin Muskego was shot on Friday. Police say the 17-year-old had an edged weapon and was coming towards some officers. Kathy Edaway Capo is his grandma. They say the teen suffered from mental health issues and used drugs, but was turning his life around. We'll hear more from them as well in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go to Abby for our weather forecast here. This week's going to really test us. We're going to have to, adjust to the not just being below zero, but being in the double digits below zero, Abby.
That's correct, and you should expect that cold condition throughout the province. We're seeing temperatures ranging from -7 down south to -14 in the northern part of the province. The northern region will be seeing more like snow, colder temperatures with wind chill, and that will also be felt in western Manitoba, the Parkland region, Red River Valley region will be dealing with light snow and freezing drizzle. Though for Winnipeg, we will see cloudy conditions, occasional flurries here and there, but the temperature will be slightly warmer compared to what the northern part of the province will be seeing. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -11, clouds rolling in this morning. That will bring a good chance of flurries late in the morning into the afternoon, and then we have a risk of freezing drizzle as mentioned late this morning. Expect a breezy day and a high around -4 for Winnipeg.
And what's up in the commute, Abby? A couple things have popped up here, I'm noticing.
Yes, we have a collision at Notre Dame, and what a southbound curb lane is blocked. Emergency vehicles on scene. You should expect some delays if that's your route this morning for southbound traffic. And also, we still have that note from the fire, the 400 block of Elgin, which is closed on both east and west, but for east and westbound traffic. That's around the Princess area, so you should use alternate route if you are around that area. If you see anything in traffic, please give us an update. Let us know. 788-3093.
Well, as I've just mentioned, after hearing days of arguments, 4 days specifically, and testimony, it took the jury just about an hour to convict Steve Shand and Harsh Kumar Patel. Shand and Patel are the human smugglers whose actions contributed to the deaths of that family of 4 from India who, by now, you know their names. The Patel family, no relation to Harsh Kumar Patel. The family that was sent across a snowy Manitoba field during a January blizzard in 2022. They were trying to cross into Minnesota and they lost their lives. Jagdish Patel, his wife Vaishaliben, their 11-year-old daughter Vyangi, and their 3-year-old son Dharmeek. They froze to death. They were trying to find a van driven by Steve Shand, who was sent to pick them up. And they were left to die. CBC's Caitlin Garlick was in Fergus Falls, Minnesota all week for the trial. Before 8 o'clock, she shared some of the harrowing testimony and photos that were seen in court. But now we're moving to what happened after the verdict was read. Good morning again.
Morning.
So U.S. justice officials speaking after the verdict, what did they say?
So one of the people we heard from was a Homeland Security special agent, and she really talked about how this case, she said, is a stark reminder of some of the horrific realities faced by victims of human smuggling, like we heard about with the Patel family. And she said for her, the case really underscores the urgent need for law enforcement to work together on investigating schemes like this. Another official we heard from really just tore into the smugglers and others like them for what they did. And as prosecutors described all through the trial, that is putting profit above people's lives in a scheme that we know pulled in thousands of dollars. And we heard, they knew the risks of the cold. We saw their texts. We know they saw those risks and consequences up close, and they never called for help. They never called it off. Here's Andrew Luger, the U.S. Attorney for the U.S. District of Minnesota, talking more about that.
This trial exposed the unthinkable cruelty of human smuggling and of those criminal organizations that value profit and greed over humanity. To earn a few $1,000s, these traffickers put men, women, and children in extraordinary peril, leading to the horrific and tragic deaths of an entire family. Because of this unimaginable greed, a father, a mother, and 2 children froze to death in sub-zero temperatures on the Minnesota-Canadian border. Our office prosecutes crimes every day, but what was revealed in this trial goes far beyond even some of the most significant criminal behavior we have seen and we have addressed. The words immoral depravity are the best that I have to describe the conduct that led to this terrible, terrible result.
What about the defense attorneys, Caitlin? How did they respond to the verdict?
Steve Shand's lawyer didn't want to talk to media on Friday, but we did briefly talk to Harsh Kumar Patel's lawyer. He says he's disappointed in the verdict, but he sort of hinted at considering appealing it. So we'll see how that goes moving forward.
What is next in the case that we understand already?
So for now, Harsh Kumar Patel remains in custody, and he has been in custody since his arrest earlier this year. We saw him brought into court in handcuffs every day last week. Steve Shand, though, meanwhile, remains out of custody. He was released shortly after his arrest in 2022, and the judge said Friday he had no concerns about him abiding by his conditions. So over the next few months, there will be what's called a pre-sentence investigation done, and a pre-sentence report produced for each of those accused to sort of help inform what kind of sentence they should get. A sentencing date for both of them has been set for March, but it sounds like that could change. And the U.S. Attorney's Office told us there's a real range of maximum sentences for the charges involved here. So some have a maximum of 5 years, but some can be more like 10 or 20 years on the high end. But we do know prosecutors on Friday wouldn't say exactly what sentences they'll be seeking for these 2 men. We also know there are still questions about Shand and Patel's co-conspirators here in Canada. RCMP say that investigation is still ongoing, and no word yet really on whether that involves that other smuggler who the trial last week heard the Patel family called for help the night they froze to death. We do know the CBC's Fifth Estate found that man, Fennel Patel, who I should note also is not related to the Patel family. It's just quite a common name in India. Fifth Estate found him about a year ago living just outside Toronto, freely. Indian police alleged Fennel Patel was part of the smuggling network that led to the Patel family's deaths, and police in that country said last year they'd begun the process to extradite that man and another Canadian man to face charges, but so far there have been no charges in Canada.
Lots of details to get through, and of course, lots of emotion as well. Thank you very much for all of your important work. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Caitlin Gowerlek, reporter with CBC Manitoba. She's back from Fergus Falls, where she was covering this trial. You can read her pieces, and please do at cbc.ca/Manitoba. It is right now 8:20 a.m. It's -10 in Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Well, next on the program, a story about money, or maybe a lack of money. $23.4 million is how much the city of Winnipeg estimates its deficit for this year is. And while that's an improvement from the projected $40 million deficit we saw in June, it is still an increase from the deficit forecast given in the last financial update just this fall. Now, typically the city would dip into the Fiscal Stabilization Reserve Fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund, to balance the budget, right? But that fund is dry. Councillor Jeff Brawadi is Finance Committee Chair. He says that in his 18 years on council, this is the first time he has seen the reserve fund drop to zero. And now he warns that not only is the city in a sticky situation, but it means that this is uncharted territory. And Councillor Brawadi is here live in our CBC studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So you've never seen this in 18 years. What are you thinking about?
Well, I think highlights the fact that, we've done a lot of things in the last number of years. I mean, COVID was a financial strain on us, without a doubt. Revenues came down, expenses were up. We have to continue operating our firefighters, for our firefighting service, for example, and we had to bring in a lot of people on overtime. You've got somebody sick in your household, for distancing rules and stuff, people had to stay home. So now that we've passed on those, COVID is basically more or less done, we are still experiencing a lot of problems.
A lot of problems, meaning what? How did the fund get drained solely because of COVID, or what other pressures were there financially on the city?
Well, again, we've been looking for a new funding formula, and the province, even in the last budget, was talking about a new deal for municipalities. In the last 3 years, Winnipeg has seen about 65,000 new people. I mean, in my lifetime, that's growth that we've never seen. But our revenues don't come up quite as fast, whereas more people are spending more money, more sales tax. People are working, they're paying more income tax. The property taxes don't move up quite as quickly, so that's sort of the delay, and it's not even necessarily coming. So that's why we're really looking for a growth revenue from the province. The Association of Manitoba Municipalities starts their meetings today, and certainly that's what we'll be asking the province for. You said tax revenues could help, but they're not necessarily coming. What does that mean, especially because the mayor ran on raising taxes to bring in money? Right. I mean, again, Mayor Gillingham ran on a 3.5% property tax increase, but what we're seeing in a lot of the things that we're procuring, the rates are going up faster than that. A typical pumper truck that may have been firefighting pumper truck, which was say $650,000, $700,000, $1.1 million. Contracts for various services going up, labor costs going up, equipment going up far faster than inflation. I mean, right now, I don't know if you've taken a trip down to Grand Forks or Fargo lately, your dollar doesn't go as far. When you're buying a lot of this heavy specialized equipment, it's in US dollars. Lots of things are costing more right now. So that all of those things have put pressure to get the rainy day fund to zero. This couldn't have come as a surprise to you, though, as finance chair, and given that you've been on council for 18 years, you must have seen this coming. Like, how quickly did this get to zero? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I guess a number of factors. COVID was part of it. Since then, there's been runaway inflation. We've done some things thinking that, hey, the government was changing. We were expecting perhaps maybe a little bit of a windfall. We knew that they're not necessarily flush with cash down on Broadway, but we were hoping that there was going to be maybe a little more help on the operating side on an ongoing basis. So we've made some assumptions and sort of put off some tough decisions, I'd argue, to this point. So, for example, Transit has been telling us we're overestimating their revenue by $5 million. We're underfunding snow clearing and ice control costs. We saw what happened over last winter, this spring, how bad the roads were. Mm-hmm. We spent a lot of money on road maintenance and pothole repairs this spring, more so than normal. So it's a collection of things that have to get done. Just because, the snow is going to fall eventually, we're going to clean the snow. We are looking at some pickups, hopefully, in the last 2 months of this year in that regard, but not enough. Right now, even if we blew the entire fiscal stabilization fund, there was a little bit left in there, about $14.3 million. We're still facing a hole to start the next year at $9.1 million. So that sort of puts us in a tough spot for 2025 already.
The deficit, although improved from the projected amount, I said this in the introduction when you were, sitting down here, but that we saw in June, it's still higher than 19.2 million deficit forecast in that last update, right? Delivered in September. How did we get to 23.4 million then? What? So quickly, is it what you were saying, that some spending has happened that you thought the province may help out with, and maybe that didn't come through?
Right. I mean, you could argue, if you looked at our budget right now, we should be putting money back into the rainy day fund to get it back up to its level of $81.3 million, which 6% of our operating budget, which should be in there. Plus, we're making some assumptions right now that I've mentioned that are not real. Those assumptions we're saying are annually about $80 million. We're asking different departments to come up with savings that they can't realistically find. Fire paramedic service, we asked them to find $3 million of efficiencies. Really tough. One of the things, they're one of the biggest challenges right now. The deficit there is about $13.1 million. Lots of overtime, lots of workers' compensation claims. I've tried to drill into it. Are people just not showing up? Is there some, management problem there? I don't think that's really the case. It seems like, 20 years ago, we had 1.29 firefighters for every person that truck that needs to be filled throughout the system. It's a 24-hour operation. What's happened, though, is a lot more people are on long-term disability, on workers' compensation, and we're not backfilling for those. In the past, firefighters were firemen, and maternal leave, parental leave is a much more common thing. So I think it's perhaps time, we may save some money by hiring more permanent full-time employees in the fire department, but we need to get to that point first.
Okay, you're raising the parental leave because if you do have women firefighters, if they are the ones to take parental leave, anyone can, but it's often women that will take at least part of the time, that you're also, those positions are needing to be backfilled.
Right, and my conversations with the union and that, it's definitely a lot, it's happening more. It's not a bad thing in the least, but it's 20 years. In 20 years, it's changed. The demographics have changed.
What do you do beyond increasing taxes? I mean, what in your sense can be done to fix this? You've said you've talked to different departments to try to find efficiencies, but you feel like they're already running lean. Yeah, I mean,
we look at other cities. Their property tax increases have been far more substantial than ours. The city of Brandon is up around 9%, Edmonton 9%. Calgary's had many years of 6, 7, 8%. So it's going to be a challenge. I'll let your listeners know this is new information here for you today, breaking on CBC. We will be tabling the 2025 multi-year budget update on Wednesday, December 11th. So at that point, we'll know a lot of what the decisions we're trying to make to move forward are.
I feel like you are giving us a preview that our taxes could be going up. Is there a proposal for tax increase in there?
Again, we're going to have to wait till December 11th. It's the last thing I want to do. We've got a lot of challenges and a lot of expenses. And, even beyond the property taxes, we have, multi-billion-dollar upgrade of our sewage treatment plant. There, I think we are seeing some progress with our discussions on the province in terms of getting the funding we need to upgrade the multi-billion-dollar sewage treatment plant. Without their funding, the federal government's funding, people's water and sewer bills could actually be more than their property taxes. So there are a lot of challenges at the city.
In terms of what's coming in that December 11th update as well, is there any hope for the what you've been waiting for between now and then for the province to come forward and say, we figured it out, we have a new, more stable funding formula that's coming through to you?
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath right now. I mean, again, we just saw a throne speech last week. There was no indication of any,
there wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, it is great that the multi-year funding freeze was ended. When we did the multi-year budget, we estimated a 2.5% range to be conservative because we thought that was going to be the worst case scenario. They've come in only at 2%. The costs that we have at the city hall in terms of emergency services, the equipment that we're buying, 2% really does not cover our increasing costs.
How might all this directly impact Winnipeggers in their daily lives? I mean, even beyond taxes, should they rise? Even the things you're talking about, trying to find backfill for some of those, emergent services and responses, trying to figure out how to, you're asking departments to find efficiencies. You're saying they're already, there's not much to find. So are we going to be potentially seeing some cuts to departments then, or cuts to services?
That's not where we really want to go. I mean, I am looking around, I see city fleet vehicles and I go, oh, That's more rusted out than my car. We are trying to stretch, as a household would do. We try to stretch the best that we can out of the resources we have. There were maybe a couple swimming pools where we had one pool closed and we increased the hours somewhere else, and we didn't reduce them after the fact because they were just so well used. We may have to go and reevaluate those decisions. We're not looking at closing or cutting anything from where it has been in the past, but we have challenges.
You're really in the weeds of trying to find, if you're talking about changing hours at facilities, you're really trying to find.
We're looking for help across the board. And again, like I say, not replacing fleet vehicles, but on the emergency side, you've got, ladder trucks. You want to make sure that those ladder trucks work in a time of need. So we're making sure that those, priority pieces do get replaced.
December 11th, it sounds like we'll invite you back to the studio. Jeff Brawadi, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Jeff Brawadi, councillor and the city's Finance Committee chair, live here on CBC. So we will expect the next phase of the update coming for the city's finances on December 11th. That's a few weeks from now. Minus 10 is where we had been. I actually haven't updated the temperature in a little while, so I better just check here and make sure. We just lost a degree. We're at minus 11 currently. We do have some very light snow falling in Winnipeg. Winds are calm. Over in Brandon, a little more active. We've got light snow and drifting snow. It's minus 14. And in Thompson this hour, just updating that there is light snow there. The drifting's calmed a little and it's minus 14. Winds are still northeast at 17 kilometers per hour. In Winnipeg, our high today is minus 4, by the way, and we are expecting flurries throughout this morning. In traffic, that 400 block of Elgin still closed, both east and west. That's right around Princess. And also there's been that collision at Notre Dame and Worth. Now that may be cleared by now, but last we heard the southbound curb lane is blocked because emergency vehicles had been on scene. So you may still have a challenge there. 788-3093 is where you can reach us. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is minus 11 in Winnipeg. We're going to warm up to minus 4 today. There is a risk of freezing drizzle later this morning and a good chance of flurries through the day. Winnipeg police officers shot and killed a man outside a bus shelter near Unicity Shopping Centre last night.
Went down, man. Drop it.
That sound from video circulating on social media. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat during a retail theft investigation. In video on social media, 2 police officers are seen with their guns pointed at the man outside that bus shelter. Acting Police Chief Art Stannard says the call that came over the radio was a tough one to hear.
This transmission is one that we never, ever want to receive. Officer stabbed in the throat. Suspect is down.
Stannard says he visited the officer in the hospital and he is in stable condition. Manitoba's police watchdog is investigating. The grandparents of a teen shot by RCMP in Norway House say they are devastated. Elgin Muskego was shot by RCMP on Friday. Police say the 17-year-old had an edged weapon and was coming towards some officers. Kathy Edaway-Capo says the teen suffered from mental health issues and had been using drugs. But she says he was turning his life around.
It's been so difficult without him, without seeing him here. He wouldn't be here right now. If he was alive, he'd be in my home. I don't know why it was necessary to kill him, to shoot him.
Manitoba's police watchdog has taken over the investigation. Norway House says it also is working on its own investigation into Elgin's death. Well, changes meant to fix problems with Manitoba's police watchdog still haven't happened. 3 years ago, the former Progressive Conservative government introduced a bill to strengthen the investigative powers of the Independent Investigation Unit. Now, that is the body that investigates serious incidents involving police. It would introduce penalties or fines for police officers who don't comply with the IIU's requests. Jerry Singer's brother, Bradley, was fatally shot by police in February. He is frustrated the new legislation still isn't in place.
It says it all, like they recognize there's a problem. They spend time, studying for solutions, and then they don't implement them.
Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says the delay is because the bill is complex. He says he is committed to implementing the changes. The head of the Manitoba Nurses Union isn't surprised another healthcare worker is concerned about rising violence. An anonymous letter written by a veteran Health Sciences Centre nurse was discussed at the legislature on Friday. The nurse says their family's worried about their safety after dangerous objects, including a crowbar, made their way onto their unit this year. Darlene Jackson is the president of the Nurses Union.
There is a responsibility to ensure that everyone in our healthcare facilities is safe. And if there is a patient there or a visitor or a family member who comes in with a weapon and then escalates, no one is safe.
The HSC tested an AI weapon detection system earlier this year. Jackson says nurses felt safer when it was up, adding she believes it will be installed permanently. A new self-guided tour is putting the spotlight on Latvian Canadians in Manitoba. One of the stops is the Carland family farm in Lithuania, or Little Latvia, in the arm of Lac de Bonnie. Peter Carland established a homestead there in 1912 after fleeing his country as a refugee. His granddaughter, 72-year-old Susan Carland, says he could never return to Latvia for fear of retribution after the country was taken over by Russia.
He lost a few friends that would go back to check out the situation. He would never hear from them again. And then I guess he just turned his back and said, you know what, this is where we're going to be living. And we just grew up knowing that we would be Canadian.
Carland says a lot of Latvians set out, not just for Canada, but for Lac de Bonnie, as they heard a lot of Latvians had been settling there. By the Second World War, the area had the biggest Latvian population in Canada, west of Toronto. Making snow. It's a dream come true at Windsor Park Nordic Centre, especially when Mother Nature failed to produce snow of substance these past few days. What you're hearing is all because of $200,000 worth of snow guns and equipment. A team of volunteers came together over the weekend to make and distribute that snow. Manager Laurie Penton says this year's season is looking bright.
For young people in the sport, sometimes it can be, like last year, it was very demoralizing to not really have much of a ski season after all the work and planning and training for the competitive season. It's so wonderful to be able to guarantee a ski facility like we're doing here.
It is the first time the centre has made its own snow from the start of the season. Penton says the manufactured snow creates a strong base that better withstands warm temperatures, and he hopes to be open by early December. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
A big thank you to the team that put the show together today, from the YouTube team to me to the newsroom, and of course the active associate producers on the show today. You've all been wonderful. Would like to say thank you to you. Let's quickly look at the situation on the road, and of course a quick look at the weather condition across board before saying goodbye today. Compared to Winnipeg, which will have some flurries later in the day, temperatures in other regions I'm looking at right now will be even colder. We're going to see wind chills making it even feel cooler than the actual temperatures in most of the area. Just expect cold, breezy, snow conditions. The north down to the west will see the hardest heat when it comes to this weather coming your way, while conditions in Winnipeg will be slightly milder with flurries and brisk breeze. Just be prepared for the wind chill. Bundle up accordingly. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at minus 11, and we're heading to a high of 4 degrees. In traffic, we still have that note about the fire at the 400 block of Elgin, which is closed both east and westbound, and that's right around the Princess, so take it easy around there. And also look out for that collision at Notre Dame and Worth. Southbound curb lane is blocked. Emergency vehicles unseen. Talk to you tomorrow.